My name is Jin Sang, and I slept through a war so I would still be young when it ended. 10 years in a coffin, and I came out unchanged. My system is the longevity system. It pays me a year of life for every year I sleep, so nothing can cage me, not even time. Then I walked home to the woman I had waited out the war for. She was 30. There was a 6-year-old in the doorway, and her mother had named her after me. Take 5 seconds to like and subscribe. The algorithm has a soft spot for both, and so do I. The path that led here is the part worth telling. Let me start from the first hour. I came awake with my mouth packed full of grave dirt. The first minute of my second life went on spitting it out onto the ground. Lee the Lame had sworn to my face that 1,000-year heartwood would not rot in 1,000 years, and the thing had gone to powder in 10. White moonlight lay flat across the black mountainside, while I hauled myself up through the collapsed lid, bare as the day I first arrived in this world. I asked the system whether the 10 years had passed. It answered in its flat clerical register, reporting that the 10-year slumber had ended and my attribute points had been credited. So I pulled the panel up in my head and read it down like a bill. It gave my strength as 1 and my speed as 1, put my defense at 1 as well, listed no spiritual energy at all, and finished on a lifespan of 80 years. I am a transmigrator, the genuine article, and my system is no heaven-defying invincible cheat. It is the longevity system, and its entire trick is that sleeping pays. Every year I sleep credits me 1 year of lifespan and 1 attribute point, so a decade underground had just handed me 10 of each. A single slumber can never run longer than my lifespan limit. The lifespan I have already burned through is recharged the moment I wake, so a man who has lived 80 years and then sleeps one day wakes owning 80 years in 1 day. On top of that, I cannot lie down again until 1/10 of my total lifespan has gone by. Stay careful then, and I get to live up to my name, which means long life. 10 attribute points sat unspent, and I left them there. I pulled clothes out of the system space, dressed, took my bearings off a 10-year-old memory, and went down the slope. 10 years is long enough for a war to burn itself out. Long enough, too, for the woman that war had driven away from me to have come home. A vendor worked the market crying that his sesame flatbread was hot, the same cry I remembered. Out of a mouth I did not. The town was the same town, but the people in it had turned over while I lay underground. 10 years is neither short nor long, and it is still enough to erase every face on a street. Then I followed my feet to the one place I had come back for. The farmhouse on the edge of town stood where I left it, and the sight curled my mouth up. I called through the doorway and asked whether Neomja was home. A small girl put her head out, doll delicate, and asked who I was looking for. I said the name again and asked whether this was still Neomja's house, and she told me plainly I had the wrong place. Something in my chest went quietly out. The war had been on when we parted, and Neomja was an ordinary person with no protector. The arithmetic was never hard, and I had simply refused to do it for 10 years. I turned to leave before the girl could see my face. Then a voice behind me asked whether it was really me, and the shock went through me like lightning. I made myself turn around slowly, and the face from before came back into the world. Her vegetable basket hit the dirt and scattered. She got one hand over her mouth while the tears came down. The small girl came flying out of the house and planted herself between us, arms spread, shouting at me not to bully her mother. That word did a great deal of work in a very short time. I looked at my childhood sweetheart with the question plain on my face, and she did not look away. She put her palm against my cheek and said, 10 years had gone by and I was exactly as I had been. I asked her why. She smiled, bent to stroke the girl's hair, and told it to me in order. After we were separated, she was hunted by bandits, and a man pulled her out of a heap of corpses and kept her alive. Half a year later, her wounds had closed and the war had stopped, and he brought her back here. Lee the Lame told her I had bought a coffin from him, so she waited 3 years. She stopped there a moment, something tired going through her eyes. Then she let out a long breath and said the man had taken care of her for those 3 years, and was truly good to her. I let it land and smiled with some bitterness in it. 10 years of slumber cost me nothing and cost her everything. We were both 20 when the war split us apart. 10 years later, I still looked 20 and she was 30. And from the first hour I arrived in this world, we had been standing on opposite banks of a river that runs one way. So I crouched instead, put my hand on the girl's head, and asked her name. She looked up at her mother first, checking. Her mother started to call me uncle, corrected herself to big brother, and said I was an old acquaintance. Given permission, the girl chirped that her name was Lee Neomsang, and she was 6 years old. I said the name over a few times and told her it was a truly good name. My own name carried the same Sang in it, I said, and I was Jin Jang Sang, and she could call me Big Brother Jang Sang. I stood and left. Neomja asked where I was going, so I paused with my back to them and waved once. My old house was gone, I said, but Lee the Lame's coffin shop was still standing and I would stay there a while. Then I walked until the street took me. Behind him, the girl watched that figure thin into the distance, then asked her mother whether Big Brother Zhang Zhang was a friend. Her mother said he was not a friend, but a very familiar old acquaintance. The girl wanted to know who this Nyeonja was. Her mother said it was probably his childhood sweetheart, since Nyeonja sounded like the private endearment a man invents for the woman he loves. The girl asked whether he would ever find her. Her mother said she did not know, and perhaps he already had, and muttered the rest to herself. Then she asked her daughter to help cook dinner, since daddy would be home soon, and the girl cheered and skipped toward the kitchen. I put my head through the coffin shop door and announced that his coffin was defective and I wanted a refund. A figure sat straight up out of a box, glaring around for whoever had slandered his craftsmanship. Then Lee the Lame got a look at who stood in his doorway and lay right back down. He informed the ceiling that his time must truly be near, since that penniless wretch Jin Jiang had come to find him. I grinned and reminded him he had personally guaranteed a refund if there was ever a problem, then asked whether shutting his eyes counted as welching. He opened his eyes with great reluctance and said he had no money, only his life, and I should take whatever I fancied. That amused me, so I asked whether he was not afraid of me, considering he shoveled the dirt onto my grave himself. He looked me over and said he was 60 this year, and the physician gave him 3 years at the outside. He had no children and no old flames either, so 3 years more or less did not trouble him. He had also known I would come back from the day I bought the box. He had seen plenty of men buy a coffin for themselves, and I was the first who looked happy doing it. He sized me up again and asked whether I might apprentice here, room and board included and no wages at all. The work suits a man with nobody in the world, he said, and anyone who learned his craft would be unlikely to starve, since this world runs short of everything but dead people. That got to me more than he knew. I can live an extremely long time, but I still die if something opens me up, and starving is one of the doors out. I had planned on a few weeks, and now a meal ticket with no expiry sat in front of me. So I complained that his terms were stingy and asked for wages. He pulled a funeral scripture out of his shirt and threw it at me. He said I was lively enough to outlive him for certain, at which point everything here became mine anyway. The shop was small, he added, so the coffin beside his would be my bed, which suited a man fond of sleeping in coffins. Then he made to lie down, and I caught his arm and asked when he intended to teach me to build a coffin. He rolled his eyes and told me more skills never weigh a man down. Nobody patronizes a shop that only sells boxes, he said, and he knew the entire funeral service end to end. Then he shook off my hand and lay down again. I laughed, agreed that more skills never weigh a man down, and climbed into the other box. After enough years in a coffin, a bed is genuinely uncomfortable. Cold came and heat went, autumn harvested and winter stored, and 8 years slipped past like a white horse crossing a gap. I settled into the coffin shop, reading in the daytime and learning the craft, and I ate properly only when a funeral feast came through, which in peacetime is not often. The 10 banked attribute points went into defense, every one of them. If lying low buys me an obscene amount of lifespan, the only attribute worth owning is the one that stops other people ending me early. Lee Villain did not die in his 3rd year either. After I arrived, he managed a full 5, and he still did not outlive me, and one night he lay down in his coffin and never got up. The shop door banged open and a young girl came through it calling for Big Brother Jiang. The noise startled me awake. I climbed out and asked Nyeomsang how many times I had told her this was a coffin shop and that it looked like nothing for a girl to run here every day. She stuck her tongue out and said she did not care what people said. Besides, with the plague running, nobody had spare attention to gossip about her. Then she told me she was making food, ordered me out of the coffin, and walked to the kitchen like she had built the place. I watched her go and let out a long breath. The plague had been rampant a year, and Yeomja and her husband both went in the first weeks of it. I handled their funeral with my own hands. The interval between deep sleeps cannot be less than 1/10 of my total lifespan, which on 80 years means 8. 8 was exactly what had passed since I clawed out of that rotted box. By the letter of it, I was free to lie down again. But the girl had nobody left now, and I could not make myself watch her stand in the world alone. Sleeping early and sleeping late come to the same thing in the end, so I would wait until she married. 2 bowls of hot breakfast went onto the table, and we drank the white porridge without saying anything. Then she looked up and asked whether I was an immortal. I told her she was a girl talking nonsense. An immortal, I said, could hardly have watched her mother and the rest of them die of plague. Her mother had been a very good friend of mine. She looked down into her bowl. Then she said she was 14 this year and not the little girl she used to be, and there were things I could not fool her about. I patted her head and asked what kind of nonsense she was spouting today. It was not that I refused to buy her candied hawthorn. Her teeth could not survive any more of it, I told her, and another day I would take her to buy some. She cut me off before I finished. She said Nyeomja was her mother's nickname, and I put my bowl down on the table. I asked her quietly whether she blamed me for not saving her mother. She said no straight away, insisting she had never blamed me. When her mother died, she had seen the grief in my face, and I had raised her like a little sister since she could walk. She knew me too well, and if I had possessed any way to save her mother, I would never have stood there and watched. Then she started to say her mother had told her the secret before she passed, and that her mother had known. I put a steamed bun in her mouth before she could finish. I told her we were hunting rabbits tomorrow and dropping the subject, and went back to my porridge like nothing had happened. The tears came up in her eyes anyway. She demanded to know why, and asked whether I had missed my chance once already and meant to do it again. So I put the bowl down and told her the truth in the only shape I could stand. I hoped it would be her descendants who buried her with their own hands, not me, and I asked whether she understood. Her fists closed hard. 18 years ago, before she was born, her mother and I had been in love, and 18 years later my face was still a 20-year-old's. She did not know how, but she knew what it meant, that I would go on living for a span mortals cannot picture. Her lips shook. Then she forced a smile and said, Brother Jungsang was always so easy to trick, that she had got me again, and as punishment, what was I giving her today? I took the small wooden rabbit out of my coat and told her it was her birthday present. She gripped it hard enough to whiten her fingers. Then she said an immortal was coming to town tomorrow to choose disciples, and she wanted to try. Immortals live a very long time, she said, and perhaps then she could stay with me always. I started to tell her immortals are not quite what people imagine, and she cut me off and asked to be willful just this once. Looking at that stubborn face, I nodded and told her to have it her way. She stood, said she was going home, and told me to get out in the sun instead of lying in a coffin all day. At the door she stopped. She asked whether I had heard the saying that a person is trapped forever by whatever they could not have in their youth. Then she asked whether all this was not simply me adding one more set of shackles to the ones I wore, and she was gone before I could answer. I stayed where I was a long time, looking at the empty doorway. What I was thinking about is nobody's business but mine. A yellow talisman went up over the town and burned with a hard golden light, and the plague that had eaten the place for a year lifted and dispersed. The whole town fell over itself with gratitude. The woman standing on a flying sword above them received all of it with a coldness that kept everyone 1,000 miles back. She waved her right hand, and a boulder some 10 feet high came out of her ring and cracked the ground where it landed. Then she announced that anyone under 16 who sought immortality could step forward and test their immortal opportunity. It was one short sentence and it lit the entire town on fire. Imperial power and official rank are things ordinary people at least know how to dream about. Immortals are past dreaming, since becoming one ends hunger and cancels the suffering of reincarnation, and even the emperor on his dragon throne must bow to a legend. Parents brought their children up in a long unbroken line. An immortal opportunity turned out not to grow like cabbages by the roadside. Most of the town's children touched the stone, and only a handful made it glow at all, dim enough to embarrass a family. Then Li Nam Sang laid her hand on the rock and the stone threw out a blue light bright enough to hurt. The woman stood beside her before anyone saw her move, examined the girl's physique, and said aloud that it truly was a top-grade water spiritual root. Then, from behind the veil across her face, she asked with open excitement whether the girl would take her as a master. Neem Sang was happy for about 2 breaths, and then the smile went out of her. The woman was in no hurry about it. Mortals handed an immortal opportunity always go anxious and indecisive, and nearly all balk at cutting the family ties that hold them. She had handled this more times than she could count. She asked whether the girl was worried about her family. Nyom Sang looked up and asked whether she would be allowed to come back after becoming a disciple. The woman said that of course she could descend the mountain once her studies were complete, and here were some things to leave with her family. Then she pulled a bundle out of her spatial ring and held it out. Nyom Sang asked what was inside. The woman told her she would find out at home, and that she had 1 hour to settle her family matters before being taken away. The girl looked at the package, and one familiar face came up in her mind again, so she bowed and asked leave to handle a few trivial things. The woman watched her walk off with narrowed eyes. Over the years there had been recruits who refused to come, and with mediocre material that hardly mattered. A top-grade water spiritual root is genuinely rare, and if she had not happened to pass through on a whim, the sect would have missed this entirely. An opportunity of that grade cannot be allowed any accidents. I was leaning against a coffin working through the Book of Burials when she came in with her lips pressed thin. She looked at my face, and a small voice came out of her saying, an immortal wanted to take her as a disciple. I put the book down. I had been in the crowd while she tested her affinity and had walked home a step ahead of her, so none of it was news. She kept her head down and would not meet my eyes. I clicked my tongue and asked whether she really wanted to go, and she said yes. I asked what for. Her hands tightened without her meaning them to, and she said softly that it was for longevity. 2 words off her tongue, light as breath, carrying a mountain's weight, because the only way to stay beside the man was to win the thing his name was made of. That stubborn face made me smile in spite of everything, so I walked over to her. Plenty of people have gone from mortal to immortal, I told her, and no immortal has ever gone the other way, which is proof the road to long life runs one direction. If one day she got tired of walking it, all she had to do was look back, because her brother Jang Sang would always be standing behind her. Then I pulled her into a hug. With my mouth by her ear, I told her quietly that cultivating immortality is a place that eats people whole, and she must always be wary of everyone around her. Then I let her go, smiling like I had said nothing at all. I turned to the woman in my doorway and made a production of it, bowing deep and gushing that an immortal gracing my humble shop made it shine. Every other townsman had carried on the same way all day. She let a flicker of disdain show, having clearly not expected a genius of that grade out of an unlucky little coffin shop. Still, she needed the disciple, so she gave me a perfunctory line about the girl having immortal affinity and limitless prospects. My smile got wider. I thanked her wisdom eye for the recognition, said Nyimseng had been mischievous since she was small, and asked her to look after the girl. Then I asked, as an afterthought, where her immortal mountain might be, since I would like to visit if I had time. Her patience thinned visibly. She said that 10,000 miles to the south there was a sect called the Yongrong sect, and that an ordinary person might not reach it in 30 years. If I wanted to come, then I should come. Then she told Nyimseng she was on a mission and they needed to leave quickly. Nyimseng set her satchel down on my floor and said she had remembered my words and would come and find me. Then she followed the woman out. After they were gone, I cleaned the room in high spirits, saying cheerful nonsense out loud for anyone listening. An hour later, I dropped it and said coldly that whoever had been hiding here this long could come out now. Nothing answered me but cold wood. I told the empty shop I would hate to invite my guest out personally, waited a while longer, and let the breath go. The old woman really had. So what if she could fly? I told the room I would be flying too after 1,000 years of sleep, or 800. She had better not harbor ill intentions toward Nyimseng, or I would dig up every ancestral grave her sect had ever filled. Then I put the coffins and the satchels she left behind into the system space. 8 years in one town without my face changing had already started rumors, and taking good care of myself was not going to cover another 8. I walked out of the shop where I had lived for 8 years. If an ordinary person could not reach the place in 30 years, I told the street, nothing stopped me walking it in 50. I have nothing but time. The town chewed over my disappearance for a long while. Some said I had attained the Tao and taken my chickens and dogs to heaven. Others said the immortal had taken me along out of love for Li Nyimseng, and others insisted she had killed me in a quarrel. There were as many theories as mouths, and then time did what time does, and everybody forgot me. Chi refining, foundation establishment, golden core, nascent soul. I lay on a patch of grass turning the pages of a tattered book I could have recited with my eyes shut. In my 20th year out of that small town, I had gone through the package Nyimseng left, of course, and there was not much in it. A cultivation technique, a medicinal pill, and some gold and silver. The technique was crude, a short introduction to the realms of cultivating immortality with the chi refining method tacked on the end. When it first came into my hands, I treated it like a treasure. Learning it meant I would not need decades of slumber to fly through the sky or slip through the ground. Then I saw more of the world and understood what I was holding. In the immortal realm, nobody counts you as having set foot on the road to long life until foundation establishment. Cultivators are nowhere near as rare as I assumed, and the only reason I never met one was that my home was too far out for anyone to bother with. The technique in my hands was ordinary cheap street goods, purchasable for 800 or 1,000 ounces of silver. I sat up and threw it into the bonfire. 20 years of daily reading meant I could recite every word backward, so the paper had stopped being worth its weight. I put a question to the system. The book said reaching the first level of chi refining within 3 days makes you a genius, and doing it in a day makes you a top-tier genius. Doing it inside an hour makes you a genius rarely seen in 100 years. So I asked what that made me, having taken 20 years to reach the first level. The system told me realm is one standard for measuring strength and not the only one, and that a cultivation technique is one method of becoming stronger and not the only method. Then it said the cultivation system of this era was not suitable for its host, and that this did not mean the next eras would be unsuitable as well. My eyes came open at that, and I asked what it meant by the next era. It told me there is no imperial dynasty that lasts forever, and the immortal realm is no different. All beings believe certain things are permanent, it said, simply because their own existence is too short to see otherwise. It added that a host who lives long enough will find nothing in this world is eternal, and that this holds for the heavenly Tao and for people alike. I laughed out loud and told the system it was truly the system, always speaking in such profound ways. Then I stood, looked at the dawn on the horizon, kicked the campfire out, and kept walking south. A man with an endlessly long life becomes two things, extremely cautious and extremely bored. To handle the boredom, I had set myself one small goal, which was to see whether Nyimseng was doing all right. Chasing that goal turned up a second hobby, which was learning. Any trade that caught my interest got a few years of my life, and in 20 years I had been a beggar, sold tofu, and learned to brew wine. The work I liked best and did best remained the full funeral service. Begging means fighting for territory, while selling coffins is peaceful. Thieves will not steal from it, Bandits will not rob it, and no noble escapes ending up inside a few planks. My dragon vein divination came along nicely too. Other men study it out of books and never learn whether a word of it works, while I bury a family and stay to watch what becomes of them. The longest I watched one family was 5 years, and that habit of stopping is why 20 years of walking had carried me 3,000 miles. Figures went by overhead now and then, riding the air like the road belonged to them, and I stood in the street of Yangrong town and smacked my lips. No wonder that woman had looked disgusted when I said I might visit, because it had taken me 50 years to arrive. An ordinary person with poor luck would be doing well to reach 50 at all. Having said my piece about the mercilessness of time, I started looking for a shop I could afford. The town sat at the foot of the Yangrong mountain gate, a favorite haunt of low-level cultivators and sect disciples, so news moved through it constantly. My original plan had been to slip into the Yangrong sect and look in on Yomseng, and I gave that up the day I arrived. Her legend was circulating for 100 miles in every direction. The Yangrong sect had produced a genius rarely seen in 1,000 years, a girl who reached Golden Core Major Achievement a mere 50 years after joining. Her talent had pulled the sect master out of a long seclusion. Every young talent in the region flocked to her, hoping to become her Dao companion, and her reply never changed, which was that all of them combined could not compare to Jiang Sang. Over time, people began calling her the purest cultivator in the immortal realm, since nobody alive was as single-minded about long life. Nobody in that entire town noticed the other side of the coin, a small coffin shop in the most secluded corner, quietly opening for business. A small bald monk put his head through my door and asked whether anyone was there. I sat up out of the coffin at the sound, which startled him badly enough that he patted his own chest once he confirmed I was alive. He asked, entirely seriously, how a benefactor could lie in a coffin when coffins are for the dead. I had been running the shop 3 years with almost nobody through the door, and without the spiritual plants I grew and sold on the side it would have shut. I told the little monk he had it wrong. Mortal or cultivator, everyone eventually dies, so why should the living look down on their own final resting place? He tilted his head, put his palms together, and thanked me for the guidance, saying he had been too attached to appearances. I laughed, jumped out, patted his smooth bald head, and asked what brought him to a coffin shop. He lowered his head and said Chambol Temple and the Yangrong sect had jointly subdued a demonic cultivator who committed a great many evil deeds. The man refused to submit even at the end and was killed by a Yangrong sect elder. Evil deeds or not, the monk did not wish to see him left exposed in the wilderness, so he wanted to buy a coffin and bury him properly. I smacked my lips and asked whether he had money, since I was running a business and could not do a losing trade. He said he had already prepared it and produced 3 mid-grade spirit stones from his storage pouch. Looking at that much value in one small palm, I picked out exactly one and told him a single mid-grade spirit stone bought my best full funeral service. Then I asked when we were leaving, and he said now, because any longer and the body would start to smell. I did not bother closing the shop door. There were 2 ordinary coffins inside, and no sane man comes to steal those. The little monk led me out to the wilderness and showed me the famous demonic cultivator. He was no different from any dead mortal I had handled, except that half his face had been taken off. I asked whether all cultivators were as heartless as this. Whatever he did alive, this was a man they had gone to enormous lengths to capture. Killing him was one thing, and they could at least have dug a pit instead of leaving him out here for the crows. In this entire immortal realm, I told the little monk, he might be the only one with any human kindness left. He answered by chanting his scriptures in silence, so I shook my head and started the body collection. Wiping away the blood, sewing the scattered flesh back where it belonged, stripping the ruined clothes off and dressing him in a burial shroud. I worked through every step with the care the dead are owed, and after half an hour his appearance was mostly restored. Down to the teeth I picked out of the dirt. Then I slapped the beast skin pouch at my waist, and a high-quality coffin came out into the daylight. With the body settled inside, I walked the ground with my compass until I found a site that would hold him properly. Digging the soil, preparing the pit, lifting the coffin down and covering it kept the 2 of us busy for a full 2 hours. At the headstone I stopped. Erecting a stone requires the name of the deceased and of the person erecting it, I explained, and asked what the man had been called. He put his palms together and said this lord had been the sect master of the demonic sect, nicknamed the Blood Demon Ancestor, and his actual name was unknown. Who erected the stone was mine to handle, he added, because his sect rules forbade him from raising a marker for such a man. I clicked my tongue and wrote it out. The demonic sect's Blood Demon Ancestor is buried here, and under it, the Undertaker. The little monk read it and asked doubtfully whether Undertaker was my nickname. I told him yes. I sell coffins and specialize in collecting bodies and burying people, so what else does that make me? Then I turned and left, waving over my shoulder, telling him to find me if anything similar came up. He stood tilting his head at my back a long time, because he had never met anyone quite like that. Back in the shop, I shut the door and turned a tooth over in my fingers. I had taken it off the blood demon ancestor's body. At a glance, it was an ordinary tooth, and under a closer look, there were fine formation patterns in the enamel. Without personally arranging that man's face, I would never have learned that teeth can be used for tricks. I stroked my chin and said out loud that it looked like a storage-type formation pattern, and a man who went to that much trouble was not hiding laundry in it. Then I waved my hand, and more than 10 thick books on formation came out into the lamplight. My cultivation talent is genuinely appalling. 50 years of daily effort had carried me to the third layer of chi refining, which a real genius reaches in the time it takes to eat a meal. Once I accepted the latter was not built for me, I put my attention into formation and alchemy instead, since those accumulate. And accumulation is the one thing I am better at than anybody. So I lit the oil lamp and started on the tooth. My formation knowledge was basic, and the blood demon ancestor's work was profound, and neither fact worried me. If one day was not enough, I had a month, and if a month was not enough, I had a year. 3 months went by with me barely leaving the building, which nobody noticed, since a coffin shop is ignored by default. When it finally came apart, I stretched a body gone stiff around the lamp. What the blood demon ancestor had hidden behind 3 months of work was a book, and the name on it read Pseudo-Spiritual Root. Spiritual roots are the foundation of cultivators and the standard by which talent is measured. Most are the 5 elements sort, graded low, mid, high, and top, plus a few variant roots that are powerful depending on circumstances. In all of that, I had never once heard the term pseudo-spiritual root, which meant I was interested, because there is nothing I enjoy more than a thing I do not yet know. It was not a cultivation technique or a secret art at all. It was an autobiography, the record of one man's whole cultivation journey, and the man was the corpse I had just buried. His talent had been close to the worst the cultivation world produces, a 5 elements mixed spiritual root of miserable quality. After struggling in the chi refining stage for years, he had a thought. If spiritual roots exist, could the quality of one be improved after birth? He did not dare test that fantasy on himself, so he tested it on living people instead. And as the bodies piled up, he worked something out. Spiritual roots cannot be improved by pills, techniques, formations, or any other method known to cultivators. A spiritual root can be improved by devouring other spiritual roots. After that discovery, he began his real counterattack, devouring cultivators weaker than himself, and watching his root climb inside a cycle that fed itself, until he was a genuine power in the world. Later, the method ran into problems he did not name. The frenzy of killing brought every sect in reach down on his head, and the autobiography stopped there. I clicked my tongue and said the blood demon ancestor was truly a talented individual to reason his way into anything that strange. Then I put the books into the system space. I asked whether the artificial spiritual root he kept circling in the second half was achievable, since most of his hypotheses made sense to me. The system answered that since its host had doubts in his heart, he might go and find the truth himself. I rolled my eyes and waved that off. There was no chance I would do something that dangerous to my own body, since an accident would be an enormous loss. I also had no intention of spending my life hunted the way the blood demon ancestor was. The system clarified that it meant I should find the safest and most reliable method. That stopped me, and I asked whether such a method existed at all. It asked why I assumed it did not, since nothing in this world is ever unchanging. The blood demon ancestor chose quick success because his lifespan was running out, and I hold a nearly infinite lifespan, so with accumulation over enough time the problem might not be unsolvable. I tilted my head and admitted that made sense. Time looks weak and powerless, and it is the sharpest blade in this world. No soul transformation old ancestor and no divine weapon has ever withstood being eroded by it, and one modest cultivation problem is no exception. The artificial spiritual root was his other hypothesis, implanting an external object into a human body until it becomes a spiritual root. It came with unsolved problems, such as which natural treasures would serve, and how a treasure could avoid being absorbed by the body instead of transforming. None of that put me in a hurry. I chatted with the system a while longer and then crawled into the coffin I usually sleep in. Collecting the blood demon ancestor's body caused no commotion whatsoever, and my quiet solitary days closed back over me. The one change was the little monk, who took to turning up every few days. Sometimes he came to hire me to collect bodies, and sometimes just to share whatever cultivation insight he had found. Mostly, though, the two of us argued about Buddha Dharma. For decades I had been reading everything that would sit still, Buddhist scriptures and Taoist classics, folk tales and vulgar novels, anything with knowledge in it. With 50 years of walking among people layered on top of that, I won most of our debates. The door banged open, and a bald man in a monk's robe announced that today this poor monk would debate me for 300 rounds. I glanced at his casual appearance and remarked that he was, after all, the successor of Cheonbul Temple and Master Ilhu in everybody's mouth. People would laugh if they saw him carrying on like this. He rolled his eyes, sat down on one of my coffins, and said they could laugh all they liked. Praising him to the heavens would not change the fact that he had been losing to me for 20 years. That is right. This was the same little monk who came to me about the blood demon ancestor's body. 20 years had turned the child into a capable young talent who handled his temple's business alone. I put my book down and asked whether that meant he still intended to debate Dharma today. He said of course, since among the humans he knew only I could match him. Then he added that my cultivation talent was truly awful, the third layer of chi refining 20 years ago and the fourth today. A realm crawling at that speed worried him, because one day I would kick the bucket and leave him nobody to argue with. I smiled and said talent is not a thing I get to decide. He said that if I had no talent he could help, since he could not change my lack of spiritual roots, but extending my lifespan was no trouble. Since I always refused to say how long I had lived, he added that he would rather not lose a friend by accident. I answered with a smile and nothing else. The great advantage of the cultivation world is that a face which never changes raises no eyebrows, since face preservation pills are not rare. I told him life and death are fixed by fate, and wealth and honor by heaven, and he should let everything run its natural course. Today I did not want to debate at all, I said, because I had a favor to ask. He refused instantly, then attached a condition, which was that he would help if I agreed to let him extend my lifespan. I looked at that stubborn face and gave in, telling him it was no problem if he did this one thing. He came straight off the coffin, thrilled, demanding to know what it was and guaranteeing that Master Ilhu would see it done. So I said he had come to the Yungrong sect for the ceremony where the longevity immortal takes over as an elder, and asked whether he thought I wanted to attend. I shook my head and told him I wanted him to hand her one item, and took a tiger-shaped wooden carving out of my coat. His face twisted as he looked at it. He asked whether I was seriously telling him I liked the longevity immortal, and warned that she has no interest at all in Tao companions. I said he only had to put the item into her hand with nothing extra attached, and if he pulled it off I would let him extend my lifespan. Faced with a request that troublesome, he threw his hands around and fretted at the ceiling. In the end he took the carving anyway and set his own terms. He would deliver it, but he would not mention my name, because once her suitors got hold of it I would die a miserable death. I told him that was fine. Watching him walk out with my carving, I said quietly to his back that I would see the little monk again in 80 years. Then I set several spirit stones into the floor, and the formation patterns I had spent 10 years laying came up through the boards. It was a random teleportation formation, unknown range and unknown destination, built that way on purpose. Nobody was ever going to backtrack the array and work out where I had gone. A flash went through the shop and took me with it, and the array on the floor scrapped itself in the same instant. Cultivators came to the Yungrong sect from every direction, some riding swords, some riding cloud and mist, a few astride powerful flying monster beasts. All of them were there to see the longevity immortal installed as an elder. She had arrived at the sect 70 years earlier and climbed to the nascent soul realm inside those same 70 years, a pace nobody in the Great Qian dynasty had ever heard of. What people talked about more than her talent, though, was her Tao heart. She started no disputes, took no Tao companion, and looked straight past the sect's internal power as though it were weather. When anyone asked what all that brutal cultivation was for, her answer was long life. A voice on the mountaintop told Nyomseng the ceremony was about to begin, and she sighed and turned her head. The person who had come for her was her enlightenment master Su Yongrong. She said quietly that she did not want to be an elder and only wanted to cultivate in peace. Her master asked whether she still could not let go of him. She said she had stepped onto the path of cultivation for him, and without him none of it would mean anything. Her master told her the man was immortal. 70 years had passed, and he would be white-haired by now if he was above ground at all, and the two of them were people from different worlds. Nyumseng smiled faintly and said her master did not understand. Big brother Jengseng's word counts, she said. He had told her the road to long life is long, and if he said it then he could do it. Su Yungrong sighed. From the day the girl arrived, her talent had shown itself, her obsession with that man growing at the same rate, and the sect master knew all about it. To break it, the sect had sent people to her hometown to fetch Jin Jiangsang. Extending one mortal's life by a few decades costs almost nothing, and would have been the cheapest business under heaven. Their people found the coffin shop long empty, and the town could only tell them he had left shortly after the girl did. Finding one mortal in a sea of people is not a simple errand. Seeing her master go silent, Nyumseng's mouth curved, and she said she had better go and take the elder's position after all. Only as an elder of the Yongrong sect could she draw more resources and better cultivation techniques. She had no intention of stopping on this road, she added, because she knew Big Brother Jengseng would not be stopping either. Then she went skipping off toward the distant sect buildings. Su Yongrong watched her go with her brows pulling tighter, because in 70 years the only thing that ever put a smile on that face was his name. a bubble that thin cannot last. Long life is what every cultivator reaches for, and not one of them has ever caught it, let alone immortal. On the day the illusion breaks, that Tao heart will come apart in an instant, and there was nothing to be done about it. On the sex training ground, the congratulatory gifts came up one after another. Sangcheng Temple presenting 2 glazed pills, Cheombal Temple presenting a Buddhist scripture. It was a procession of treasures that would have made most cultivators weep, and the longevity immortal did not glance at any of it. Having already handed over his temple's gift, Ilyu stood there fretting. He had no idea how to deliver a wooden carving, and Jinjiang Sang was stubborn enough that a failure here meant no lifespan extension, ever. With the next sect already stepping forward, he braced himself and called out that he addressed his martial aunt, and that her martial nephew had one more congratulatory gift to present. The ceremony went dead silent, and every eye swung onto him. Cheombal Temple's gift had been presented already, so this one was plainly his own, and a man presenting his own gift needs no explanation. The longevity immortal turned her head slightly and said without expression that he was considerate. Her indifference surprised nobody, and the crowd settled in to enjoy the show. Since Cheombal Temple's cleverest successor had aimed his worldly desires at the one woman in the region wholly devoted to the Tao, Ilhu swallowed hard and offered the carving up in both hands, already calculating the scolding waiting at home, and estimating he would not leave Cheombal Temple for 10 years. Countless divine senses swept across the gift the instant it appeared, found a plain wooden carving, and the whole ground nearly broke out laughing. Young men love a flashy gesture. In 70 years, the longevity immortal had been handed many tokens of affection and burned every one in a single sweep, so everybody knew how this ended. Then the woman who had not moved all morning stood up. Her nascent soul cultivation put her in front of Ilhu between one breath and the next, and looking at the thing in his hands, her body began to shake. She picked it up and ran her fingers over the marks the carving knife had left. Only Big Brother Ginseng in all the world shaped an animal like that. He had not broken his promise, and he had never once been anywhere but behind her. She closed her hand around the carving and smiled, and the smile was enough to drain the color out of heaven and earth. She said she liked this item very much, told Ilhu to come and see her alone after the ceremony, and then repeated the word alone. The guests were left staring at each other, since the longevity immortal had apparently taken a liking to a Foundation establishment monk. The Yungrong sect master was the only genuinely delighted man in the courtyard, thanking his ancestors that Niumseng had finally figured it out. The monk's seniority, strength, and age were all somewhat off, and none of it looked fatal. Seniority would rise on its own once those few old monks at Cheombal Temple retired. Strength was the trickier half, and the Yongrong sect did not appear to own a single decent dual cultivation technique. The moment he decided Li Nomseng might be interested in Ilhu, Zhou Do-Q, sect leader of the Yongrong sect, worked out several plans in a row. He greeted the monk warmly as his virtuous nephew, and asked after the health of his master, Zen Master Hiehe. Ilhu could not understand why a woman famous for her coldness had taken to an ordinary carving, and he could feel everyone present had misunderstood something enormous. He reported that his master was in good health and had recently come by insights, which was why he had sent this humble monk in his place. The sect leader pronounced him neither humble nor arrogant, a talented disciple of a renowned master. Then he said the older generation would not interfere in the affairs of young men. In 100 years, once his realm was stable, the monk should remember to come to the Yungrong sect and propose. Ilhu started to explain that the sect leader had misunderstood and got cut off before he could finish. He was told not to be so wishy-washy and not to feel embarrassed about being temporarily the weaker party. Then the old man produced a saying: "A woman 3 years older holds a gold brick, a woman 30 years older gives you a kingdom, and a woman 3,000 years older gets you into the ranks of immortals." His closed-door disciple was only 50 years the monk's senior, the sect leader added, which is nothing among cultivators. He would speak to Zen Master Haye personally, since Cheombal Temple hardly lacked precedent for forming Taoist companions, and the two of them had known each other over 300 years. Watching the misunderstanding grow every time he opened his mouth, Ilhu gave up explaining. His only remaining plan was to get his martial aunt alone and lay the whole thing out. Standing in an empty storefront in Yungrong town, Ilhu insisted to her that the carving was not his, that this place had genuinely been a coffin shop, and that she had to believe him. He was very close to crying. Jinjiang Zhang, that bastard, had vanished, and now 100 mouths would not clear him. The instant the ceremony ended, he had rushed to find her and recounted every year of his acquaintance with the man, then brought her here to prove it. Every trace of that life had gone with the shop, leaving bare walls as though Jinjiang Zhang had never existed at all. Through all of his panic, she stayed perfectly calm. After a long silence, she asked Ilhu whether he wanted to become Taoist companions with her. His eyelids started jumping, and he said no, that he did not want to now and would not want to in the future. She said that was best, and if he ever dared entertain the thought, she would pluck his bald head off his shoulders. From this day forward, he was not permitted to mention the name Jin Jiangsang to anyone who asked, and if he let slip even half a word, his life would not be guaranteed. The murder in it made the monk understand something at last. His martial aunt knew the man, and by the look of things had known him a very long time. He promised not to reveal half a word, then pointed out that he came here often, and anyone investigating with ulterior motives might turn up clues, and asked how to answer. She thought about it and told him he could recount their shared experiences truthfully as long as he hid the man's appearance and his name. If someone insisted on a title, he should say the man calls himself the Undertaker. He asked whether he would ever get to see him again. Probably, she said, because the man is deeply nostalgic. Then she turned and left, and Il-He looked at her back and then at the empty shop, carrying questions nobody was going to answer. Only time was ever going to unravel any of it. Azure Dragon on the left, White Tiger on the right, Vermilion Bird in front and Black Tortoise behind. I checked the compass one more time, confirmed the geomancy was as excellent as it looked, and slapped my thigh in the middle of an empty wilderness. The teleportation array had dropped me somewhere I had never seen, and I had been walking the region ever since looking for this. 8 years watching Yumsang grow up, 50 years of walking to reach the Yongrong sect, and 20 more in Yongrong town comes to 78 of my 80 years of lifespan. That leaves me 2. A man about to sleep needs a good place to do it, and the digging alone took a full year. Walking back and forth inside the finished cave, I kept smiling at my own cleverness. A year of forcing a hollow into that mountainside had bought me a room nobody would ever find, and I built the entrance a disguise as well. Above the mouth, I piled a great mass of loose soil and mixed a quantity of seeds through it. The first heavy rain would wash that soil down across the stones blocking the entrance, and after the seeds grew for a year or two, every trace of artificial excavation would disappear. Proud of myself, I brought a jade coffin out of the system space, filled with liquid that gave off a heavy medicinal fragrance. That coffin was the second half of the plan, the manufacture of an artificial spiritual root. I asked the system whether the method would really work. It replied that its host would know once he had tried, and the cost of failure was only sleeping time I do not care about. I agreed out loud that even total failure would cost me nothing, stripped off my clothes, climbed into the medicinal liquid, and began an 80-year sleep. 10 years of turning the Blood Demon Ancestors autobiography over in my head had produced a method that was both safe and reliable. At the start, I kept failing because although spiritual roots supposedly sit inside the human body, not one person alive has ever seen one. So I made a bold assumption, which was that there is no such organ in the body at all. What every cultivator calls a spiritual root is nothing but a person's sensitivity to a given attribute, and the higher the sensitivity, the better the grade. From that assumption, a harmless method fell straight out, which was to soak in the essence of plants and trees. Spiritual herbs carry the wood attribute, so a long enough soak should raise my sensitivity to wood attribute spiritual energy, until I own a wood spiritual root. Better still, a body in slumber goes lifeless, which removes the problem of my flesh absorbing the essence instead of adapting to it. Put simply, the plan was to pickle myself as the medicinal ingredient in my own jar of wine. The lid came down and my life force went out entirely. Every organ stopped, nothing told me apart from a genuine corpse, and with the life force stagnant, the body took in nothing at all. The essence of plants and trees kept permeating me from the outside anyway, slowly, without once stopping. Time flies like an arrow and the days and months shuttle like a loom. 80 years is a blink for me, and it is not a short span for anything else alive. In that mountain range, whole generations of plants had gone through dozens of cycles of reincarnation, and the sapling by the cave mouth was now a tree as thick as a man's waist. Inside, a grinding friction sound went along the walls as the heavy lid of a dull jade coffin began to move. A hand covered in green hair came over the edge and gripped it. Then the humanoid monster attached to the hand sat up and exhaled a long breath of turbid pale green air, and the monster was me. I did not go for the attribute points first. I brought out the magical artifact for testing spiritual roots, laid my green-furred hand on the crystal ball, and watched it fill with deep green light. Then I laughed until it echoed. Artificial spiritual roots work, which means I no longer have to spend every century worrying about being taken apart on some great cultivator's table. That fear has sat at the back of my skull since I learned this world had a cultivation world in it. Attribute points accumulate, but building enough to stand against the old monsters at Nascent Soul and Soul Transformation would take a span even I cannot guess at. One unlucky accident anywhere in that span finishes me, so I need the power to protect myself during the transition. With a high-grade wood spiritual root confirmed, I opened the panel in my head. It still gave my strength as 1 and my speed as 1, but it had defense up to 11, showed no spiritual energy, and closed on a lifespan of 160 years. I sat in the coffin and stared at it. I asked the system why my attributes had gone backward. I had been at the 4th layer of chi refining when I lay down. That strength was negligible, but it had lifted every attribute a certain amount, so I wanted to know why I read like a mortal again. The system answered that during slumber, the spiritual energy in its host's body slowly dissipates outward. Without it, the host's attributes fall back to the standard of a mortal, except for power gained through attribute points. I pulled a face and accepted it fast enough. With a high-grade wood spiritual root under me, I could climb back to the 4th layer inside a few days. Then I dumped all 80 new attribute points into defense without a moment of deliberation. Looking at a defense attribute standing at 91, I asked the system what class of cultivator that number could hold off. It reported that with defense at 91, anything below the mid-foundation establishment realm cannot break through. Mid-foundation establishment can injure me, and late foundation establishment can injure me seriously. There is a genuine risk of death at the peak of the foundation establishment stage, and anything above foundation establishment kills me outright. It was still talking when something detonated at the cave entrance. A figure came bounding through the hole in high spirits, announcing to nobody that heaven was helping her, and this time she would definitely break through to the 9th layer of chi refining. Then she saw the jade coffin, and the corpse covered in green hair sitting upright inside it, staring straight at her. The scream she let out went through the roof of the mountain. She called a flying sword and threw it at me, and I put a hand up out of reflex, and the treasure sword bounced away. Watching her strongest method fail seemed to walk her through all 99 ways she was about to die, because her eyes rolled back and she fainted where she stood. I scratched my head, climbed out, and went to look at her, and up close my intruder turned out to be a young girl of the monster clan. She had 2 fluffy fox ears on her head, coarse cloth clothing, and the look of 16 or 17. I could not work out what a monster clan girl wanted here, since I owned no treasures worth blasting a mountain for. When I picked this place to sleep, I deliberately avoided anywhere with dense spiritual energy, precisely so no treasure hunter or cultivator would stumble across me. From what she had shouted on the way in, though, she opened this cave on purpose. The confusion did not last because she was still gripping a rejuvenation grass, and from its growth the thing was at least 80 years old. Rejuvenation grass is a very ordinary spiritual medicine, and when I scattered seeds over the cave mouth, I threw in a careless handful of it. I had not expected one of them to break clean to its growth limit and survive a full 80 years. If I have not guessed wrong, that grass is what brought her here. I am halfway to the cave mouth when the fox-eared girl wakes and finds a green-haired corpse sitting upright, staring at her. She folds into a ball and begs me not to eat her, insisting her meat is sour. I tell her she cannot know that without tasting it, and that she looks plump and juicy enough for a fine meal. That only makes it worse, and she swears she is not plump, only carrying baby fat, and that she is skin and bones that would chip my teeth. She covers her face with both hands and her ears droop flat, and the pain she is bracing for never arrives. She spreads 2 fingers and studies the cave through the gap, and sees a corpse that has put on clothes, and combed the green hair off its face. She asks whether I am not an undying bone after all. I roll my eyes and explain that a corpse which refuses to rot for 100 years becomes a zombie, and one that refuses to perish for 1,000 becomes an undying bone. Such a thing is born of the gathered death energy of heaven and earth, untouched by water or fire, and hard to wound with a sword. It runs on resentment and eats flesh and blood. If a creature that ill-omened had truly sat in this coffin, there would not be enough of her left to sweep up. That settles it, and she drops into a full kowtow and asks a senior's forgiveness for disturbing his cultivation. My plan had been something ominous, then send her off. Then I reconsider, because 80 years ago the teleportation array dropped me here at random, and the rest of that time went into digging my own tomb. I know nothing about the country around me, and wandering blind is how a man collects trouble he never ordered. So I ask her how she came here alone, and where the rest of her clan is. She answers respectfully that she wandered here alone and has no clansmen. I ask what year it is and what has changed in this part of the world. It is the 380th year of the Great Qian Dynasty. She adds that 380th year of the Great Qian Dynasty, she adds that 300 miles east, a soul transformation expert has appeared at Sengchong Temple. The name drops into the map I built before I slept, back when I hoarded every chart I could buy so a random teleport could not strand me. I know well over half of the Great Qian Dynasty, and Songcheng Temple sits about 1,000 miles from Yongrong Sect. I did not expect to be thrown that far. I tell her that since the trespass was unintentional, I will not pursue it, and that she is free to go. She blinks and asks, without meaning to, whether she is really leaving just like that. I ask her coldly what else she wants. A senior in this situation is supposed to bestow opportunities, she says, and when I ask who told her that, she says it is how the legends go. Her eyes are perfectly clear and perfectly foolish. Foxes are supposed to be cunning, and this is the first I have met who came out simple. So I give her opportunities. I recite whatever insights at the foundation establishment stage I can dredge up, all borrowed from a small monk named Ilhu, who used to argue Tao with me. He would talk about anything except the cultivation techniques of Cheongbul Temple. Everything else I know, down to his bedwetting at 5. When I am done, I wave her off, Tell her our fated affinity ends here, and warn her that turning up in front of me again would cost her that life. She bows deep once more and thanks me and says the name Homerang will never forget this. Then she goes. I watch her out of sight, then pick a direction nothing like hers. My defense is very high now, and my offense is essentially zero. A polite way of saying I could not beat that little fox. Had she noticed, the conversation would have gone somewhere unpleasant. As for those generous Foundation establishment insights, whether any of them are worth anything is beyond me, since I never reached Foundation establishment myself. I leave the cave that held me 80 years and go back to drifting. Neem-sang has her own life now and does not need me hovering at its edge. The only task left is to find the next thing that will carry me through my long waking years. A roar goes through the scripture pavilion, and I lift my head from a pile of books to find senior brother Cheongpeng stalking the aisles in his Taoist robe. I give him my most innocent smile and ask whether something is wrong. He tells me I have been at Songcheng Temple for 10 years and am still hovering at the 9th layer of Qi refining. He wants to know whether I intend to reach Foundation establishment at all. I wave the question off and say Foundation establishment is nothing to rush, with no great harm in taking it slowly. The road of a life is long enough to be walked at a comfortable pace. His eye twitches at that, over and over. I came up this mountain 10 years ago with a high-grade wood spiritual route, and the temple decided at once to spoil me. I smile at everyone, do my chores carefully, and never elbow anybody aside for reputation. My days go into Taoist scripture or diligent cultivation, which is the sort of little junior brother any sect would treasure. The trouble is that over the years they all worked out my real problem, which is that I am too patient. A high-grade wood spiritual route normally reaches Foundation establishment in about 5 years. I have spent 10 and am still not there, stubbornly, on purpose. Cheongpeng rolls his eyes and says, "It is not a question of slow." He accuses me of never having intended to Foundation establish at all. Other cultivators stretch Qi, refining to lay a solid base. He says, but nobody drags it out 10 years, and even at the 9th layer I cannot beat an outer disciple sitting at the 7th. He demands to know what on earth I want. I tell him cultivating Taoism is simply cultivating Taoism, and needs no shelf of goals. Where fighting is concerned, he is quite enough on his own, since one more of me adds nothing and one less takes nothing away. Then I ask him to stop making things difficult and turn back toward my books. He does not let me. He takes my collar and lifts me clean off the floor, telling me to stop trying to fool him, because Foundation establishment came down as a personal instruction from Master. I have to break through whether I want to or not. The limitless secret realm is about to open, and the old man secured me a place with his own hands, so there is nowhere left to run. Cheongpeng carries me out by the collar and I go limp and let him. The main hall of Songcheng Temple holds an old man with Taoist bones and an immortal air. The 10 inner sect disciples stand in 2 neat rows, me at the very end. After a long silence, he asks how many years since I entered his temple. I cup my hands and tell him 10. He nods and recounts it for the room. The Grand Master came out of seclusion that year. I happened to be passing the mountain, and he picked me out of the vast sea of humanity at a glance. He brought me up here, declared me fated with Taoism, and handed me inner sect disciples standing on the spot. Then Master walks over and sets his right hand gently on my shoulder. I yelp that my bones are breaking and ask him to be gentle, struggling, though there is no escaping the grip of Reverend Wonson. His face is doing something complicated. He forces a smile and says grimly that he will not presume to rule on whether I am fated with Taoism. He would like an explanation, though, for why the lightning-struck jujube wood that has sat on the back mountain for 300 years is now a coffin. 9 sets of senior brother mouths twitch at once. Master dotes on me more than on any of them, and while the others have corners of Songcheng Temple they may not enter, no such line was drawn for me. Inside these walls I go where I please, including the Grand Master's seclusion chamber. What nobody imagined was that I would touch the one thing Master treasures most. He took that lightning-struck wood off a great monster at Golden Core Perfection 300 years ago, then spent 30 years in seclusion healing what it cost him. Ordinary disciples are not permitted to touch it, and most not even to look at it. I made it into a coffin. Cheongpeng asks Master to forgive me this once, since the whole thing was unintentional, and my other senior brothers add their voices. Master repeats the word unintentional back at them with no warmth in it. He gave me the outer formation route and never the core, he says, and 3 years ago the wood still sat where he left it. Yesterday he went to look and found a first-rate coffin. He is curious, he tells the hall, what species of unintentional act breaks silently through a great formation of his own and turns the wood inside into furniture. Under that stare I am a little guilty. I point out that the wood had sat there a long time, and that although the material is rare, at Master's realm it is of no use to him. He lets go of my shoulder and takes my ear instead, careful about it, since my strength is the feeblest of the inner sect disciples, and a slipped hand would have powdered that shoulder. He asks whether he needs a 9th layer disciple to teach him what is useful. The wood was kept to carve the three Pure One's patriarchs, so outsiders would walk into Sangcheng Temple and feel reverence for the Tao sect. Now it is gone, and he wants to know what I propose to do about it. I ducked my head, which frees my ear, and pointed the clay statues of the three Pure Ones already in the hall. Taoism lives in the human heart, I tell him. Clay is enough, and a man who wants outsiders to understand our Tao sect should not lean on external things. Then I take out a brush and walk past him out the door. Master is visibly thrown. By custom, I was supposed to admit my fault meekly, let my senior brothers plead, and give him a graceful way out. A stunt is not in the script he prepared. He follows me out with all 9 senior brothers behind him. I run spiritual energy across the couplet boards flanking the main hall until the old characters smooth away. Then the brush moves like a dragon and a snake, and 22 characters come up out of the wood. If your heart is wicked and perverse, burning incense will do you no good. If your conduct is upright and grand, there is no harm in never bowing to me. Chiyoungpeng says the word good out loud before he can stop himself. The little junior brother is indeed fated with Taoism, he declares, since those characters carry the whole bearing of our Tao sect. I smile and keep my mouth shut. Master keeps his face cold and tells me my comprehension is passable and my strength worthless. The lightning-struck wood is noted rather than settled, and if I fail the foundation established inside the secret realm, I should start worrying about my legs. Then he tells us all to get out because the sight of us annoys him. My senior brothers hustle me away before he changes his mind. Behind us, he stays in the courtyard a long while, reading the couplet. Reverend Wanson recites it 10 times before letting himself be pleased. Only a disciple of his could write something so soaked in the Tao, he decides. And look at that brushwork, elegant and beyond an ordinary hand. That bald donkey Hai and that scoundrel Zhou Dukchu have strutted for years on the disciples they took in. Once his own boy reaches foundation establishment, the two of them will need deflating. He walks off with his hands behind his back, satisfied. A blurred figure surfaces in the emptied hall, remarks that 1,000 years of cultivation still leaves a man less perceptive than his own grand disciple, and is gone before the words finish. Several streaks of light cross the sky, and the mortals below watch with the longing reserved for the omnipotent immortals of this world. What they cannot see is that one of those immortals is spectacularly unambitious. I ask senior brother to thicken his spiritual energy, because the wind is too strong for reading. Chung Peng stands at the tip of a virtualized flying sword with his hands behind his back, while I sit cross-legged behind him pinning down pages. He waves his right hand. The shell thickens, and the pages settle. He asks what exactly I am reading all day. Anything at all, I tell him. I like books, and I like looking at every single thing this world has in it, but the world is too large, and tens of thousands of years might not be enough to see all of it. So I read first and look afterward. People write books to turn what they have seen and heard and felt and understood into words and leave those words behind. Reading one is close to living a stranger's whole life. You never get the whole picture, but you get a glimpse. Chiyoungpeng takes the bait and asks whether all that reading has helped. Of course, I tell him, or I could never have deciphered Master's core formation. Every senior brother on the sword turns his head, and up front Reverend Wanson tilts an ear back toward us. He was heartbroken about the wood, but the question eating him is how a nascent soul cultivator's formation was broken by a 9th-layer disciple. Chiyoungpeng asks whether that means Master has a formation standing in the scripture pavilion. I tell him he must be joking, because Master is not skilled in the Tao of formations. The words sting, and one scene privately notes that an ascent soul figure should not be appraised by a 9th-layer disciple. Xiangpeng asks how I broke it. Then, since even an unskilled ascent soul formation is beyond a 9th-layer disciple, normally he would be right, I tell him, but he has overlooked one principle, which is that everything in this world leaves a trace. Master is temple master here, and his foundation comes from Sangcheng Temple, and I have read 8 or 9/10 of the formation books in the scripture pavilion. What Master dabbled in was the 5 elements formation lineage. Working through those volumes, I found his own notes and annotations, and learned his habits when he lays a formation. Xiongpeng turns to second senior brother Myongwol, who keeps the scripture pavilion, and asks whether the temple even has a 5 elements formation lineage. Myongwol allows that he may not read as widely as the little junior brother, but he does know how the shelves are sorted, and has never heard of any such lineage. Of course he is not, I say. He has guarded the scripture pavilion 30 years, and the 5 elements formation was pulled off those shelves 50 years ago. The approach was fashionable a century back and was gradually replaced. Myongwol looks at me like a man arriving somewhere he does not want to be, and asks whether I went to the book tomb. I laugh and tell him his wisdom eye is in fine order. Nothing in this world stays fixed, and cultivation techniques are no exception. Everything shifts from the great methods of golden core and ascent soul down to beginner formations, because some genius is always putting forward a new idea. So the scripture pavilion is swept out every 50 years, and the outdated classics replaced. The discarded books go to a storeroom the disciples call the book tomb. The temple has stood thousands of years, and nobody knows how many books are down there, or what kinds. Myung-wol went a few times as a new disciple, turned up a mortal romance novel of low character, decided the rest was useless, and never went back. He takes a breath and asks, carefully, whether I have finished the book tomb. I tell him not to joke, since I entered the sect only 10 years ago and could not have finished. He lets the breath out. Then I add that I have read 3/10 of it. Myung-wol repeats the words 3/10 as though injured by them, and works out that 3/10 must be a colossal 400,000 volumes. Not that many, I tell him. There are 983,521 books in the book tomb. Over these years, I have read 286,385 of them, which is barely 3/10. Myung-wol goes quiet, and so do the rest of them, and so does the nascent soul cultivator steering the sword. It takes Changpeng a few breaths to recover. He half remembers Master mentioning the 5 elements formation lineage, a signature skill of some sect. 200 years back, later phased out. Whatever survived in the scripture pavilion, he reasons, would be introductory at best. He asks whether basics were enough to break Master's grand formation. Of course not, I tell him. Master is not skilled in formations, which makes it likely he cannot compose one himself. Everything he knows about formations came out of the scripture pavilion to begin with. In my second year here, Master showed me the lightning-struck wood. To decipher the core formation guarding it, I spent a year on every formation book in the scripture pavilion, and by comparison identified what he had laid down. It was the 9 Palaces 8 trigrams formation, blended with the Big Dipper formation, with modifications of his own. I tried many times and got nowhere, and that formation kept me out 5 solid years. Then I found the 5 elements formation classics in the book tomb, along with the old ancestors' own insights. They showed me how Master had fused the two by borrowing the principles of the 5 elements. After that came another year and a half of attempts, and 10 days ago I finished the coffin. Nobody says anything. Changpeng looks at Master with open pity, the sort that says his lightning-struck wood did not die unjustly. Master looks out of places to put his exasperation, since this disciple of his spent 8 years turning a treasure into a box for the dead. He cannot decide whether to praise the perseverance or scold the idiocy. 8 years is not nothing to a cultivator. A mortal's lifespan tops out past 100, and foundation establishment stretches to 200. Golden core reaches 500. Nascent soul runs to something like 800, and only the soul transformation old ancestors break 1,000. His disciple burned 8 of those years on carpentry without appearing to worry about the arithmetic. The entrance to the limitless secret realm is packed with sects large and small when we come down out of the sky. Zhou Daokyu, sect leader of Yongrong sect, comes over beaming to greet Reverend Wonsin. 50 years have gone by, he marvels, and Wonsin has broken into the middle Nascent Soul stage. Truly cause for celebration. Master does not give him a good look. He tells Zhou Daokyu to say what he came to say and be done, since this poor Taoist would rather not keep company with a vulgar man. Zhou Daokyu looks wounded and asks why a member of the Tao sect keeps such a fiery temper. His own realm is a little higher, he allows, and his disciple a little stronger, but that is no reason to be angry about small things daily. He knows Wonsin envies the disciple he took in, a girl already in the late Nascent Soul stage before her 200th year, talent the great Qian dynasty has never produced. If Wonsin truly cannot find one himself, their friendship is such that he would happily help look. Master spits on the ground and says nobody cares about his broken disciple. This old man has a better one, he announces. If that girl is late Nascent Soul before 200, his own will be late Nascent Soul before 100, so just wait and see. He storms off with all of us in tow. Zhou Daokyu curls his lip, then strolls toward the seal with his hands behind his back, humming. He does not enjoy it long because Master turns the exchange over, gets angrier the longer he thinks, and doubles back for another word with that scoundrel. Xiangpeng is told to take his junior brothers inside without him. He only smiles, since Zhou Daokyu and Master have a friendship they would die for, and he has watched them squabble for 150 years. I have been searching the crowd a while, and I ask why the genius Yongrong sect calls the longevity immortal is nowhere in it. She went to the border of the great Qian dynasty, he says, and not only her, because Zen Master Ilhu of Qianbul Temple went as well. I ask after that name from somewhere near the bottom of my soul. Xiangpeng takes my blankness for ignorance and explains that Zen Master Ilhu is the successor of Qianbul Temple and the second greatest genius in the dynasty, behind only the longevity immortal. He reached Lake Golden Core a little past 100 years old, and people say he is most likely to surpass her one day. So the timid, kind little monk grew into someone who handles things himself. He used to debate Tao with me every few days and lose far more often than he won. Time is the strongest cultivation method there is, and I lay down a while and woke to find the little monk had become a Zen master. I asked what the two of them are doing at the border. Fighting Night Moon Country, Cheongpung says, as if I should have known. Night Moon Country is a nation of the Monster Clan, and it goes to war with the Great Qian Dynasty every 200 years. The dynasty has won many of those wars and has never once wiped them out. This time, for reasons nobody can name, Night Moon Country opened the national war early. Only 170 years have passed since the last one, 30 years ahead of schedule, and that is strange enough to bother a man. The smile goes off my face. I read the records in the booktomb, and they described something that mixed cultivators and mortals together and ground both. A horror the writing could not convey a tenth of. Even nascent soul powers fell in it. An early war on top of that leaves me with an unease I cannot put anywhere useful. Cheongpung reads my face wrong and assumes I am frightened of the war. He tells me not to bother, since only cultivators at the Golden Core realm are qualified to take part. By the time I get there, it will have finished long ago. Then he pushes me and Wansan toward the altar, because the limitless secret realm is about to open. Cheonbul Temple, Yongrong Sect, and Sengcheng Temple, the three great sects of the Great Qian Dynasty, break the seal together. A deep black hole opens on the altar and swallows everyone chosen. After a long dizzy spin, Wansan and I are standing in a sea of flowers. He tugs my sleeve and asks where this is. My 9th senior brother is famously timid at Songcheng Temple, which is easier to forgive once you know he is 13. There were 9 inner disciples here before I came, each with his own skills and temperament, and the youngest holds water and fire spiritual roots both. I ask whether a man at Foundation establishment could not be a little less frightened. He gives me a bitter smile and reminds me that Master carried him up the mountain at 3. His life since has been cultivation and more cultivation, so how could he know the outside world the way I do? I grin and ask whether he is willing to listen to me. Of course he is, he says, since he kept watch when I went to steal Master's lightning-struck wood. Good, I tell him. Then we start picking flowers. He asks what we are picking flowers for. To brew wine. This should be the 100-flower sea, where blossoms of all 4 seasons grow at once. I read about an immortal brew called 100-flower wine in an old book, made from 4 seasons of flowers with every petal fresh. The conditions were so strict I have never once been able to attempt it. Now the ingredients lie around underfoot. Wansan frets at the other end of it since Master sent us here for opportunities and asks how we explain a winemaking holiday when we come out. According to the map I dug up, there is a ruined bronze ancient temple 30 miles east. There are opportunities inside, and to take one you must pass a test. And if I know that, everyone else knows it too. So he has 2 choices. He can go there, sit the test, and fight disciples from every other sect to the death over the reward. Or he can stay and brew 100-flower wine with me, because Master and third brother both love a drink, and men holding a jar tend not to hand out much punishment. Wansan tilts his head, thinks it through, and squats down in the flowers next to me. Time goes by in pieces. The geniuses who came in with us tear the place apart looking for opportunities and fight savagely over every one they find. We pick dewy petals in the morning, lie in the flowers at noon staring up at the sky, and spend the afternoons rebuilding the wine by the old method. Then Wansan starts waving from across the flower sea with the look of a boy who has found something. He points at the ground and tells me there is a stone slab with patterns on it. I crouch, brush the loose soil away, and there it is. Carved. The thing feels large under my hand, so I tell him we should dig it out. 2 senior brothers of the Dao sect spend an hour at manual labor in a flower bed. At the end of it, a huge coffin sits in the open, strange characters cut into the lid. Wansan studies them and asks what kind of characters these are, because he cannot read a single one. Of course he cannot. They are 2,000 years old. He yelps that the Great Qian Dynasty was founded only 1,800 years ago, so this coffin predates the dynasty itself. I tell him to be quiet, because I picked up only some of these characters out of old books, and need to think. He claps a hand over his mouth and stands there like a good boy while I work. An hour later, I wipe the sweat off my forehead and tell him we are, in fact, extremely lucky. He asks what it says, and I tell him it is a short account of a man's life. He cultivated from childhood. By 18, he had fought 3,981 battles, winning 756 and losing 3,225. By 80, he had fought 4,498, winning 1,325 and losing 3,173. By 200, it was 1,650 battles, 985 won and 780 lost. By 500, it was 130 battles, 115 won and 15 lost. At 1,000, he fought 9 and won 9, and looking back, there was no longer an opponent left in the world. The account goes on. He sought an opponent all his life and could not find one, and says plainly that it was lonely past bearing. He found a cave heaven once and thought about growing old there alone, but chose elsewhere, unwilling to let his legacy be cut off. So he buried this stone coffin beneath the flower sea. The road to long life is long, the last line says, and only those with sincere hearts can walk it. I read it out in one breath, and Wonsan's mouth does not close for a while afterward. He says the man was too amazing, then asks why he fought fewer battles as he aged. I ask whether that needs thinking about, since with every passing year fewer people were left alive who could fight him at all. Those 9 battles at 1,000 years old must have shaken the earth apart. 9 battles, 9 victories, 4 plain words, and you can still hear the man's excitement underneath. They were almost certainly the most satisfying fights of his life. Wonsan asks why the senior left a legacy here without a test, and whether he was not afraid of somebody picking it up. I ask who told him there is no test here. The entire limitless secret realm is the test. It is called limitless because it is nearly endless. It opens once every 50 years, and it has been opening since the Great Qian dynasty was founded. 1,000 years on, the treasures inside are still not cleared out. With an inexhaustible mountain of gold before them, who stops to look at a beautiful, useless field of flowers? We cultivate to seek the Tao, and some seek the martial Tao, while others seek the Tao of long life. Whichever road a man takes, what matters most is not letting external objects lead him off it. Then look at the people who came into this secret realm, eyes locked onto every treasure in reach. How would any of them remember what they set out for? A man who has forgotten that never stops to look at a flower sea. Wonsan nods along, understanding some of it, and asks the senior's name. I do not know, since it is not written, so we may as well open the lid. The stone grinds as we lever it, and before Wonsan can get his head over the gap, a bright light comes out and swallows us both. After another long spin, we stand in a vast white space with a man at the center whose face will not resolve. Obtaining this opportunity proves we have not been led astray by external objects, he says. He was skilled in fist techniques, and this set contains everything he learned in his life, which he hopes later generations will treasure. Then he begins to practice, alone, in front of us. The moves are not complicated, and each one carries something I have no word for. When the demonstration ends, he tells us the techniques rest not on the moves, but on the concept behind them. In his later years, he faced 9 opponents, and 9 punches went out, and 9 opponents fell. The space rearranges into a mountain peak with 9 powerful black figures in a ring. Auras heavy enough to press on the air. He throws one punch slowly, and the mountains and rivers around him come apart. Wonsan and I cannot speak, so we stand and watch it happen. 9 punches, each carrying a different concept, at a realm so far above me that I have no hope of comprehending it. When the fight ends, we are back in the white space. Whoever practices his fist techniques should remember, he says, that the technique may lose, but the aura of the fist must never weaken, and a punch thrown must split the opponent's liver and guts. The space starts to collapse, and the figure fades along with it. I cup my hands and ask the senior for his esteemed name. Some awareness comes back into that expressionless face. The world calls him the 100 Defeats Immortal Venerable. I thank him and ask what the set of fist techniques is called. In his hands it was his fist technique, he says, and in mine it is my fist technique, so the fist technique is nameless. He finishes the last word and vanishes, and the flower sea is around us again as if none of it happened. Wonsan announces that he has reached the Golden Core realm, showing it off like a boy with a new toy. He went from the middle of Foundation Establishment straight to Golden Core, which makes me check my own realm quickly. I was at the 9th layer of Chi refining when we climbed into that coffin, and I am now at Foundation Establishment Perfection, a step short of Golden Core. He asks how he reached Golden Core in under an hour. It was not an hour, I tell him, since we were in there at least 2 months. 2 months, he repeats, as though the number had insulted him. When we dug this coffin out, we wrecked a good deal of the flowers around it, and he should look now, because they have grown back. The realm is thick with spiritual chi, but not thick enough to do that in under a month or 2. He looks around and finds that I am right. It felt short because the Immortal Venerable's realm was so far above ours that our sense of time went wrong. And while he demonstrated those fists, our bodies had already practiced them many times unnoticed, which is why our realms moved. If 2 months are gone, Wonsan says, then we must be leaving the secret realm soon. Probably. The limitless secret realm stays open 5 months, and we spent 2.5 brewing wine and another 2 learning a dead man's fists. I tell him to pack, since we could be spat out at any moment. Then I walk to the temporary hut I put up, where 10 jars of 100-flower wine wait, painstakingly made and not yet tasted. The altar shudders and the black hole throws bodies out by the 100. Some are triumphant, some furious, and a few carry eyes full of murder. Then everyone notices the same wrong thing at once, which is that the elders of every school are gone. 1 or 2 people left to collect them. I ask 6 senior brother why he stands there alone, and where Master and the senior brothers went. He forces a smile and tells me the border region is in an emergency, and that they left 2 months ago. The 2 of us seem to have gained a great deal, he says, which relieves him. Sangchong Temple is ours to manage for now, and they will be back very soon. Then he leaves on his sword before I can ask anything else. My brows stay pulled together long after he is gone, because 6th senior brother has a reputation for composure, and I have never seen him anxious. Whatever is happening at the border region, my worry runs to Master and my senior brothers, and also to a little monk and a little girl. The unease does not last, because I have lived long enough to know a plain truth. Things beyond your reach do not decline to happen, because you would rather not watch them. Worrying is a worse use of a day than living it happily, since time proves everything eventually. That includes whether my guesses were right. Back at Songcheng Temple, I returned to my comfortable life, reading in the book tomb or working the 100 defeats Immortal Venerable's nameless fists to keep my body honest. When Reverend Wansen went to the border region, he took more than half the temple's strength with him. Wansen is still young, but between the two of us the temple keeps running. The more he handles, the faster he grows, and before long I am a manager who manages nothing. One thing does exceed my expectations, and that is the war. The fighting between the Great Qian Dynasty and Night Moon Country runs a full 20 years. In the 5th year, even the soul transformation old ancestor long sealed in seclusion goes to the border region. I set down the last book in the book tomb and stretch a stiff back. A handsome man in a Taoist robe walks over, sword-eyebrowed and bright-eyed, and asks what I decided about yesterday's conversation. No, I tell him, barely looking up. He wants to know why. 10 years ago, I promised him that once he finished every book in the book tomb, he could go to the border region. He has finished them, and he would also like me to remember that he is the acting abbot of Songcheng Temple. 20 years have gone by, I tell him, and the little brat who used to ask me about everything finally dares to bang a table and argue with me. Not bad. He has made progress. His eyes go red and his voice catches. 7th senior brother is dead, he tells me. 5th senior brother is blind, and big senior brother, who loved all of us most, has lost an arm. He is at Lake Golden Core now and can help them, and he cannot stand to watch anything else happen to his senior brothers. For once I do not know what to say to him. I have followed the border region for years, and the Great Qian Dynasty is not doing well. More than 10 Nascent Soul cultivators have died in battle, and there are rumors of soul transformation cultivators beginning to fall. Sending Wansan to a battlefield like that is sending him to die, because a Golden Core cultivator there is cannon fodder with slightly better manners. I am hunting for an excuse to keep refusing when a familiar chi comes down over Songcheng Temple. We go out to greet it and find third brother, covered in blood, his left hand gone and his right eye blind. He announces that he is now abbot of Songcheng Temple, with 9th junior brother Som Wansan as deputy abbot. Every branch of the temple, great and small, is to withdraw 3,000 miles west. The laziest man I ever met has turned decisive, and he issues the orders before greeting either of the junior brothers he has not seen in years. Only when the orders are out does the wire in him slacken. Wansan walks over shaking and asks where Master and the others are. Third brother's voice comes out hoarse. For reasons nobody understood, Night Moon Country's Nascent Soul cultivators doubled in number. Master was surrounded by 3 Lake Nascent Soul cultivators and fell on Phoenix Mountain. The senior brothers were moving together when they were ambushed, and big senior brother Changpeng self-destructed to throw third brother clear. The Great Qian Dynasty has lost the war and is ceding 5,000 miles of territory, beginning at the border region. Wansan sways, then grabs third brother by the collar and demands to know what happened to Master's body. He wants to know why it was not brought back, and whether third brother wants their master refined into a puppet. Third brother does not resist and does not answer, and the silence goes on long enough to hurt. I tell Wansan to stop shaking him before third brother dies of it, and my calm voice is enough to make him let go. When he turns around, he finds I have already carried the lightning-struck wooden coffin down from the back mountain. Before he can work out what I mean to do with it, the porcelain bottle is out, and a medicinal pill goes into his remaining hand. None of the news seems to have touched me, which is something I stopped apologizing for long ago. His foundation is damaged and my abilities are limited, and I tell him plainly I cannot save him. Night Moon Country did not push that hard for 5,000 miles of dirt, and their real goal is the whole dynasty. Wansan has good talent and is still childish, so third brother has 50 years to teach him, because the future of Songcheng Temple sits on that boy. I put the coffin into my system space, turn, and walk for the gate. Third brother comes back to himself and asks what I am going to do. I stop, and for a moment I have no answer ready, and then I tell him I am going to collect the bodies of Master and the senior brothers. He should not laugh, but before I came to Sangcheng Temple, my old trade was selling coffins. That lightning-struck coffin was made for Master in advance, and it turns out I finished it just in time. We cultivate the Tao to reach long life. Everyone assumes that once they have it, they are free, and nobody notices that long life is the heaviest suffering there is. The world is a sea of suffering, and long life means floating in it forever without a shore. Master and the others have climbed out, and we ought to be glad for them. I hesitate again, then turn and give third brother the brightest smile I have. He once told a story out of the cultivation world, I remind him, and used it to frighten Wansan. There is a mysterious existence out there who specializes in collecting the bodies of those whose lifespan has run out. When he appears, death has already arrived. Nobody knows his name, and everybody knows what to call him. The Undertaker. Third brother's eyes flicker, and he keeps his mouth shut. I go on cheerfully, because he once investigated that story and found the Undertaker first appeared 100 years ago to bury the blood demon ancestor. He also found the Undertaker has an entangled connection to Zen Master Ilhu of Cheongbul Temple. On that subject, I would only say the Undertaker is nowhere near as terrifying as the story makes him, being no more than a man who sells coffins. Then I turn, wave over my shoulder, and walk out. Wonsan shouts after me, asking whether I will come back. I have made a coffin for each of them, I tell him, and when they need it, I will return. Behind me, third brother stands full of feeling, because from the day this little junior brother arrived, he had noticed something wrong about me. Time seemed to leave no trace on me at all. There are pills in the cultivation world that hold a face young, but time marks the heart as surely as the body. 10 years passed, a 3-year-old grew into a boy of 13, and every person on that mountain changed in some direction. After 10 years, junior brother Jiangsang's eyes were still as clear as the day he arrived. Third brother put it down to an excellent state of mind at first. Then 20 more years passed, he came home, and those eyes were exactly as clear as before. He sighs and tells Wonsan to announce to the world, shortly, that the closed-door disciple of Songcheng Temple died of qi deviation. Wonsan asks why, since brother Jiangsang is perfectly fine. He is told to do as he is told, because Jiangsang has his own road and his fated affinity with Songcheng Temple has ended. Wonsan is silent a while, then nods. He was carried up this mountain at 3 and started a few months ahead of Jiangsang, which is why he outranks him. From childhood until now, he has thought of the man as his elder brother. If it were up to him, brother Jiangsang would not be leaving, but no feast in this world goes on forever. Third brother sees the mood on him and puts his one remaining hand on the boy's shoulder. The Grandmaster always said, those who enter the Tao Gate are shallow in the 6 emotions and deep in loyalty and righteousness. Other people may not understand a man like that, he says, but the two of them do not have the luxury of not understanding him. Outside the gate, I look at the blue sky, then at the immortals streaking home from the border region, and I laugh at my master who loved his own face so dearly. He guarded that face all his life, so there is no chance he would consent to lie in foreign dirt after death. His disciple will bring him home. Between master and disciple, there is no charge in spirit stones this time. Then, I take a step toward the border region and start walking. The great Qian dynasty has been beaten, and the front is one long fire, and none of it has ever been my business. I have one goal, which is to find my old friends and put them somewhere they can rest. 2 monster race guards at the gate inform me that humans entering the city pay 3 copper coins. They are third layer of qi refining, and I hand the coins over obediently. Inside, the spiritual energy is thin, and I decide it was very correct not to advertise my cultivation. Even a small city has a golden core cultivator standing over it, which raises the question of how Night Moon Country got strong so suddenly. I carry the question to an inn and settle in. On this corpse-collecting journey, I have not flown my sword once or traveled on spiritual energy, but gone the most primitive way there is, one step at a time. The land ahead belongs to Night Moon Country now, and a human race golden core flying in the open sky would be easy to notice. Caution turns out to have been the correct instinct. The closer I get to Night Moon Country, the better I understand why the great Qian dynasty lost so completely. There are simply too many monster race cultivators here. Foundation establishment is everywhere. Golden core ordinary, and the sense soul turns up often enough that nobody looks twice. Against numbers like that, losing is the only reasonable outcome. I order a few local specialties, meaning to taste the place before moving on, and 2 monster race men at the next table ruin the meal. Their monster king's daughter is holding an open selection for a son-in-law, and anyone above Foundation establishment may attend. The second has heard, and asks what it has to do with either of them, since their monster king is of the noble Silver Moon wolf race. Not qualified is not qualified, the first says, but it is worth going to look. He has heard the fox race prepared an Ascent Soul Realm puppet as a congratulatory gift. The second refuses to believe it. The fox race brought that puppet back from Phoenix Mountain, the first explains, and killing the cultivator it was made from took 3 late Ascent Soul old ancestors. Master, it took me 5 years to walk here, and the moment I arrive you hand me a problem this size. The fox race is one of the great clans of Night Moon Country, and I would like to know how a man takes anything out of their hands. I certainly cannot beat them. I sit stewing, and then an idea arrives so bad it circles back around into being good. The fox race is powerful. The monster king of Night Moon Country is the Silver Moon Wolf King, and the Wolf King is shopping for a son-in-law. If I were his son-in-law, prying a puppet out of the fox race becomes a family matter instead of a war. The idea is absurd on its face. In theory, though, it holds together, and the longer I mutter at it, the more workable it sounds. In the imperial palace of Night Moon Country, a messenger reports that the princess has escaped. The Silver Moon Wolf King wants to know why nobody is out looking, and promises that if his daughter loses a single wolf hair, he will be collecting heads. The whole palace tips into chaos on the spot. On a mountainside outside the imperial capital, meanwhile, a lively girl is sticking her tongue out at the distant city. If they like marrying so much they can marry each other, she informs the horizon, because she is not playing along. The problem is what to use for a betrothal gift. I sit on a mountaintop with that question and get nowhere. Ever since I learned the Princess of Night Moon Country wanted a husband, I have been working out how to win a beautiful wolf's heart, and the inventory is thin. I have a handsome face and a great deal of knowledge, and the list stops there. I am still stuck when somebody starts screaming for help in the distance. 2 Golden Core Monster Clan cultivators are chasing a woman at Foundation Establishment. She spots me watching, changes course, and comes flying straight at me, calling out that they mean to kill her, and begging a senior to save her. I do not say a word. I circulate every scrap of cultivation I have, and leave like smoke off a candle. Behind me, the woman is presumably wondering where the hero saves the beauty, and whether I possess a shred of curiosity. Her resentment does not slow me in the slightest. Seeing me shrink and the 2 behind her grow, she grinds her teeth, takes out a jade talisman, and crushes it. Golden light comes out of the fragments and ties itself between us, and then she is simply there behind me, matching my speed exactly. I ask why she is sticking to me. She cups her hands and pleads again, telling me those 2 want to kill her and asking a senior to lend a hand. I tell her to stop deceiving me with acting that clumsy, because those 2 are not here to kill her. Somebody who wanted her dead would not chase this long without attacking once. Also, she should look at herself, hung with magic treasures head to foot, which is not reasonable property for a Foundation Establishment cultivator. She is a rich family's young lady who ran away, and the 2 behind her were sent to bring her back. She threw out one careless line and I answered it like a machine gun, and by the look on her face I got most of it right. She has never met me and is fairly sure I do not know her either, which leaves her staring at a stranger who read her life off a distant silhouette. She stops pretending and lays it out. Those 2 are indeed here to bring her back, and at worst she gets scolded and confined a few days. My situation would be different. If I do not help her shake the pursuit, she will tell her family I lured her out, and then I can spend some time imagining what they will do about it. I ignore that and put my attention on the talisman fastened to me. She watches without the slightest worry. That shadow-following talisman was refined by an Ascent Soul cultivator, she says, and a mere golden core like me could never break it, so I would be better off running faster. The 2 chasing her are late golden core and about to catch us both. I look back and find she is right about the distance closing, and something in me finally gives out. I tell her I want no part in her family business and nothing whatsoever to do with her personally. We can let the whole thing go if she will only stop pestering me. She answers by conjuring a bead over her head, informing me that she will do as she likes, and inviting me to break her protective shield if I think I can. Since she is determined to be ungrateful, there is nobody to blame for what follows. I set my face and start making hand seals. At first she pays no attention, because a golden core cultivator has never been worth her notice. If her spiritual power were not nearly exhausted, she would never have hitched a ride with a stranger. Then something in the seals registers. She says the words "Blood Escape of Sangchung Temple" out loud, and follows them with the discovery that I am Human Clan. I congratulate her on guessing right and inform her there is no reward. She lunges to break the shadow-following talisman between us, but the blood escape is finished and nothing she does now matters. I spit a mouthful of heart blood, turn into a streak of bloody light, and vanish over the horizon with her attached. The 2 Monster Clan cultivators behind us are left dumbfounded, since nobody expects a mid-golden core to own an escape technique that profound. Nobody expects an unknown Human Clan cultivator in the heartland of Night Moon Country either. One of them opens his mouth to ask what they do now and gets slapped across the face by his companion. What they do is chase. The princess has been carried off by a Human Clan cultivator, and if this goes wrong, their clan can start counting down to extermination. They burn their essence blood to give chase, and it does them no good. I spent many years at Sangchung Temple learning almost nothing about fighting, but my escape techniques are polished to a mirror. 2 late golden core cultivators have no chance, and there are ordinary Nascent Soul cultivators who would not catch me either. 300 miles later, a man and a woman drop into a quiet valley. I throw out several formation flags and plant them in a ring around us. Then I run a set of hand seals with the ease of a man who has done it 1,000 times, and the formation rises. A light barrier closes over the pair of us. She takes out an ancient dagger and asks what I intend, warning me that if anything happens to her, my fate will be worse than death. I smack my lips and tell her I had no interest in causing trouble. She brought this on herself, so there is nobody left for her to blame. She scoffs at the idea that this formation could hold her, and calls up 2 powerful magic treasures to break out. The treasures rise, her body goes loose underneath her, and she folds onto the ground. She asks in real terror what I have done to her. Nothing much, I tell her, only suppress the bloodline inside her. She is right that the formation is shoddy, since it is a remnant I found in an ancient text and patched into something barely usable. Its one effect is to suppress a monster race bloodline and force the true form out. Her terror climbs. It cannot exist, she insists, because if the human race had such a formation, the Great Qian dynasty would have used it long ago. I ask how a monster race girl gets this far through life without basic common sense. Of course, the formation has limits. The version in the ancient text could reach monster race cultivators at Golden Core, while the patched one I carry only reaches Foundation establishment. It is also fragile enough to fall apart at a touch, as she has seen. If she had spent that moment attacking instead of talking, the ending might have looked different. Her body shrinks while I speak and settles into a small, pure white wolf. I pick up the storage ring that dropped from her hand, look it over, and ask for the method to unlock the restriction. The wolf on the ground tells me in human speech not to bother, that she will never tell me and that I can kill her if I dare. I do not dare kill her, I agree, but I can shave off all her fur. That gets her extremely agitated, and she informs me I would not dare. I take out a razor. One pass of the blade leaves a strip of pink skin across the top of her head. She feels the cold on her scalp. Fat tears roll out of her wolf eyes, and she gives me the method along with the opinion that I am a very bad person. With the restriction open, I empty the storage ring onto the grass, and a small mountain of spirit stones and magic treasures comes out. I swallow and tell her she has a substantial fortune, more than many ordinary Nascent soul cultivators could show. I sweep all of it into the system space rather than my sleeves. The goods are excellent, and I do not dare touch them, because this creature clearly has a background, and any of those treasures could be marked. Inside the system space, nothing leaks, and no powerful figure alive can trace me through a stone tagged before I ever saw it. The bald little white wolf watches her fortune disappear and points out tearfully that she has given me everything and can be released now. If it is not enough, she can get me more. She begins, because her father is somebody, and that is as far as she gets. I pinch her wolf muzzle shut. I do not want to know who she is, and I do not want to know who her father is. If she keeps her mouth closed, then I will let her go the moment my business here is finished. If I learn her identity, the only road left in front of her is a dead one, and I ask whether she understands that. The muzzle in my hand nods. Good that she understands. Next comes a small modification, guaranteed to leave her completely made over. I lift the wolf up with what I am reliably told is a mischievous smile, and her screaming goes on through the valley, as though something cruel were being done to her. It is only ink. In the imperial palace of Night Moon Country, the Silver Moon Wolf King rises off his throne and asks the hall to repeat itself because wool has been taken by a human race cultivator. Soul transformation pressure comes off him, and every monster race body in the hall shakes under it. The two Golden Core cultivators who lost the princess are past terror and into something quieter. A monster race princess carried off by a human race cultivator is too large a matter, and their entire clan could not shoulder the blame. The Wolf King frowns and works his right hand through a divination for his daughter's whereabouts. A moment later, he tells them that losing the princess was a dereliction of duty and sends them off to receive their punishment. They thank him profusely and leave the hall as fast as their legs allow. He waves the attendants away and asks the turtle elder what he makes of it. The old man leaning on his staff says the matter is not simple, since he divined her whereabouts the moment she was taken and came back with nothing but chaos. Somebody concealed her, and no human race cultivator at Golden Core is capable of that. The Wolf King agrees, having divined it himself and found the heavenly secrets thoroughly muddied. Interfering with heavenly secrets takes at minimum a soul transformation cultivator, so whoever took wool arrived prepared. The turtle elder hesitates and says a simple kidnapping would be the easy version of this. What worries him more is that the man who took her came for the other matter. Night Moon Country conquered half the Great Qian dynasty overnight and produced cultivators out of nowhere, which is hard not to find suspicious. He adds that the monster race's internal affairs do not look especially united either. The Wolf King's eyes narrow and he asks whether it is the Swordtooth Tiger clan. Not only them, the Turtle Elder says, because the Fox clan has been moving frequently as well, and both behave like people who know wool is the key to everything. Then let them play, the Wolf King decides, since he is very much in the mood to play back. It will also remind them who exactly is king of Night Moon Country. In the imperial capital of Night Moon Country, I walk with a pitch-black, bald little mongrel dog in my arms, looking around with open curiosity. This is the capital of the monster race, and it looks no different from a human race city, because so many cultivators here wear borrowed human shapes. I suck in a breath through my teeth. Looking down, I find the little mongrel dog biting my forearm with real commitment. I tell her to let go. She wants her snow-white wolf fur back. I have explained many times that the ink is my own recipe and does not wash out. The only route back to her original color is to shave the coat and wait for new fur. Also, seeing her so sad about it, I decided to name her Snowy. It will commemorate the color she no longer has. In my arms, the wolf says nothing at all, and I can feel her promising herself that this is far too much bullying for one wolf, and that I should wait. Snowy rode in the crook of my arm down the main street of the Night Moon country capital. I kept my voice light, the way a man talks to a dog nobody is listening to. I asked how many cultivators of the great Qian dynasty her people had routed in the war. Then I asked the thing I actually wanted. The longevity immortal of the Yongrong sect and Zen master Ilhu of the Chambul temple had both vanished inside Night Moon country's borders, and I wanted to know whether her people had killed them. She scoffed and said that if they could have killed those two, they would have done it long ago. Of all the people in the great Qian dynasty who were hard to handle, that pair sat near the top. She got as far as saying that who would have thought the two of them actually, and then she stopped and tilted her head up at me. She told me flatly that I was fishing. I said I was only making conversation, and that we could drop it if she preferred. She asked whether it was really just conversation. The blood escape I had used was a secret art of Sangcheng Temple, taught to nobody below inner sect disciple. The Qianbul Temple, the Yongrong sect, and Sangcheng Temple were the three pillars of the great Qian dynasty, all three tangled together. I looked down at the bald little white wolf and told her she was very smart, which was exactly why her answer left me more confused than before. Blood escape was a Sangcheng Temple secret, I said, and there were outer sect disciples who had never heard of it, never mind a member of the monster clan. She had named it on sight, so I asked her to explain how. She shifted around until she found a comfortable spot against my forearm and yawned. She was of the monster clan and I was of the human clan, she said. Different races in different countries, so what made me think she would tell me anything? Then she added that she was curious about me all the same. Sangcheng Temple had 9 true disciples, she said, and 4 of them stood far above the rest. Their names read together as a couplet: clear wind and bright moon beyond price, near water and far mountain full of feeling. Zheng Peng and Myung Wol had already fallen. Li Jiamsu had escaped with serious wounds, and I was plainly not him. So with the formation work she had watched me do, she wanted to know whether I was the 9th true disciple, Song Wonsan. I told her she knew Sangcheng Temple better than the cultivators of the great Qian dynasty did, and a fact like that pointed one direction only. She agreed cheerfully. There was a traitor inside the great Qian dynasty, she said, and I was welcome to guess who. I told her I did not need to guess and did not want to. Dynasties rise and fall without asking me, and all I wanted was to carry my master and my senior brothers home in boxes. That made her insufferable. She crowed that so this was my plan, then told me the plan was already dead. The corpse of Reverend Wanson, abbot of Sangcheng Temple, had been refined into a puppet by the Fox clan. The Fox clan was thick with experts and watched over by a cultivator at soul transformation, so what exactly did Amir Golden Core expect to do about it? Then she turned generous, offering that if I released her in a good mood she might return my master's body. I thanked her for the kind offer and said I would not release her until I was certain of my own safety. Then I asked casually whether her elders had left any marks on her. She told me to guess. I said I had checked her over many times and found nothing inside her, but subtler work than I could detect was still possible. So for safety's sake I had planted 87 restrictions in her body. If anything unexpected happened, she would die on the spot. She panicked and told me I would not dare. I explained that daring had nothing to do with it, since the thing was already done, and asked why else she thought I had been carrying her everywhere. I pointed a finger, and a profound pattern surfaced across her fur in a slow bloom. A heartbeat later, she lost the ability to shape human words, and all that came out of her was furious barking. My mouth twitched at that. Then I walked toward the grounds where Night Moon Country was picking a husband for its princess. The Wolf King sat alone on a high throne, and below him stood an old man with a white beard. That was Turtle Elder, his right hand in all things. Nobody knew where he had come from, and but for his contributions in the recent war, hardly anyone would have known the name. When the Wolf King saw that every summoned clan was present, he rose. Every citizen knew, he said, that he, Wanan Agolta, had exactly one daughter, Wanan Wol. His daughter had reached marriageable age, so he meant to pick the most outstanding young talent under heaven and give her to him. The crowd came alive, because becoming the Wolf King's son-in-law amounted to owning Night Moon Country by proxy. A young man with bronze skin and a heavy build shouldered out first, saying he had long admired Princess Wanan and was willing to try his luck. He let his aura off the leash and showed middle-stage golden core. The whispers named him Im Biam, young lord of the Sword-Toothed Tiger clan. An elegant young lord with a folding fan came out laughing to meet him. He called him Brother Im, said he too admired Princess Wanan and suggested they compete fairly, pushing his own pressure out before Im Biam had finished speaking. Im Biam narrowed his eyes and asked since when Hojan had admired the princess and whether he was making it up on the spot. Hojan laughed and said a man does not need to announce his affection to the world the way Brother Im does. Im Biam sneered and let it drop, because arguing with the Fox clan has never once profited anybody. With both young lords in the ring, the rest of the monster clan visibly deflated, since nobody there matched either of them in blood or in strength. A handful entered anyway as a formality and none of them were close. When no one else came forward, the Wolf King drew breath to announce the terms. That was when I shoved out of the crowd and said I wanted in. I apologized my whole way out of the crowd, pleading urgent business, then straightened my rumpled clothes and cuffed my hands. I greeted the Wolf King as a cultivator of the human clan named Jin Jiang Sang, admitted I had never met Princess Wanan, and said I wished to compete for her hand regardless. The grounds erupted. Everyone had assumed the latecomer was some overslept young lord of the monster clan, and instead a human had walked into a monster clan marriage contest. Somebody shouted at the human to get out of Night Moon Country, and the cursing came from every direction. I smiled through it, since a man who has spent 80 years dead in a coffin tolerates being shouted at. The Wolf King pressed both hands down and the grounds went quiet. He asked what I was relying on to marry his daughter. I said I relied on nothing but a sincere heart, since walking into a monster clan marriage contest as a human took no small courage. That amused him. A good sincere heart, he said, and for its sake this king would let me compete. He had said from the start that any cultivator above Foundation establishment was qualified, and human or not, I met the condition. The trial was the next day, and whether I succeeded was my own affair. He got up to leave, then stopped halfway and told Turtle Elder that the human had come a long way with nowhere to stay, so he should be lodged at the Ho residence. He did not want the human clan going home saying the monster clan had no hospitality. Turtle Elder bowed and accepted, and the Wolf King vanished. The crowd drifted off grumbling, since the king had spoken and nothing was left to argue about. I turned to Ho John at once, greeted him as Brother Ho, and said I would be imposing on his household for a few days. He looked me over and smiled back that Brother Jin's courage was genuinely admirable, and that sharing a roof with me was a great blessing. Mbiam watched us trade pleasantries and looked physically ill. He said the Fox clan always went in for shameful nonsense like this, and that my clothes marked me as a defeated general of the great Qian dynasty with no standing here. I did not so much as raise an eyelid. Hojan did it for me. If Mbiam's brain was not working, he said, he should stop embarrassing the monster clan in public, since Night Moon Country had beaten the great Qian dynasty, and not the human clan. If some human clan power overheard that, and a racial war came of it, could Mbiam carry the blame? That shut his mouth. Nobody borrows 100 times his own nerve and then volunteers to own a war between races. His aura flared anyway, and he came within a breath of settling it there. Turtle Elder walked between them and asked whether the monster clan really wanted to brawl with itself in daylight for outsiders to laugh at. Mbiam made a cold noise and left. Hojan turned back all apology for having stumbled onto a painful subject, saying his Fox clan had always been close to the human clan. I told him Brother Ho was a straightforward man, and I was not the sort to keep accounts. Then I walked to the tree where I had left my luggage and scooped up the bald black mongrel still barking herself hoarse. Hojan asked whether the animal was my war pet. I laughed and said not really, that I had found her by the roadside, thin and wandering, and had not been able to leave her there. He declared me a truly benevolent man, so we strolled off toward the Ho residence chatting and laughing while Snowy thrashed in my arms with everything she had. Not one person spared a glance for a bald ink-black mongrel. In the Imperial Palace, the Wolf King sat tapping a slow rhythm on the arm of his throne, while Turtle Elder reported that the human had been delivered to the Ho residence. His daughter had been carried off by a human, the Wolf King said, and now another human had turned up at the marriage contest, and he wanted to know whether the two facts were connected. Turtle Elder answered that the man's origins were unknown, and the timing far too neat, so presumably he was tied to the disappearance. He could not be the mastermind, though, since a golden core cultivator is nowhere near qualified to veil the workings of heaven. The man was a pawn, and until the princess was found, nothing rash should be done. The Wolf King agreed and asked Turtle Elder to dig the human's origins out to the root, because he wanted to see who stood behind him. Turtle Elder accepted and withdrew. Alone, the Wolf King let his face go cold. His daughter had been taken, and whoever took her had then sent a golden core human into his own capital to humiliate him. If he ever got his hands on the one behind it, he would tear him apart. At the Ho residence, I had just settled in to rest when a woman came calling. She opened by asking whether the senior still remembered her, then answered herself by saying it was Marong. I studied the face in front of me for a moment before it landed. She was the fox-eared girl I had met 30 years earlier, the first member of the monster clan I laid eyes on after I woke. I said so and asked how she came to be here. Ho Marang glanced around the courtyard and said we should talk inside, that this was no place for it. She pulled me into the room and shut the door, then stood there with her mouth working and nothing coming out. After a long silence, all she managed was that I should never have come to Night Moon Country, because Night Moon Country was nothing but trouble. I smiled and said that for a little fox she seemed to know a great deal. None of it concerned me, though, since my goal was simple, and I only wanted to marry Princess Wanon. My calm made her worse. She said she knew perfectly well I had not come for Princess Wanon, and that whatever I actually wanted I should leave immediately, because the husband selection was a fraud. Snowy, tied in the corner, started barking like the world was ending, denouncing this traitor to the Monster Clan. Unfortunately, Homerang belonged to the Fox Clan and not the Dog Clan, so barking meant nothing to her. I asked what she meant by a fraud, since the Fox Clan and the Tiger Clan had both entered candidates. And I asked how a minor member of the Monster Clan knew about it. She had no answer for a moment. Then she set her teeth and said that, if not for the opportunity I once gave her, Meringue would never have reached Foundation establishment. She could not tell me what the fraud was. What she could tell me was that the site would certainly be the forbidden ground of Night Moon Country, and that going in without the key item meant death. The Fox Clan and the Tiger Clan already had the key item, so they were in no danger. And if I insisted on going, I had to find the other humans inside. 5 years ago, during the war, 2 human clan cultivators had gotten hold of certain secrets and been hunted into the forbidden ground by a soul transformation expert. If those 2 were alive, they were my only way out. Then she fled before I could ask anything else. I picked the barking little mutt off the floor and loosened her restrictions so she could curse properly, which she did, at length. I stroked her fur until she ran down, then asked whether she might now tell me the secret of Night Moon Country. The 2 chased into the forbidden ground were, unless I was badly mistaken, the longevity immortal and Zen master Ilhu. She gave me a look of pure contempt and said I could kill her, and she still would not tell. Then she said I absolutely must not let her go, because the moment she was free she would tear Homerang apart. The Fox Clan had gone soft and let Homerang live, and Homerang had turned around and helped outsiders, so she deserved to die. I said calmly that it sounded to me as though Night Moon Country had been through a serious purge. She had been a cultivator at the 9th layer of chi refining when I met her. I said, not even finished transforming. Every word out of her mouth was innocent in a way no cultivator who clawed up from the bottom ever sounds. I had wondered even then how a young lady of a prominent Monster Clan house came to be wandering alone. Now it was obvious she had not run out. She had been driven out. The little white wolf looked at me coldly and said, Homerang was no young lady of any house, only an ordinary member of the Monster Clan. I told her she was covering and that it was understandable because she had never lived a low-level cultivator's life. Down there, the cultivation world eats its own, and friends as close as siblings will kill each other over one spirit stone. A girl with that temperament, born to nothing, would have been dead long ago. Now that she was back with the Fox Clan, she was almost certainly collecting on an old blood debt. Snowy sneered and asked what a small Foundation establishment cultivator thought she was going to avenge. Even with me thrown in, she said the 2 of us could not raise a ripple in Night Moon Country. I told her again that I did not care about Night Moon Country's secrets, only about carrying my master and my senior brothers home, and asked why she would not believe me. She said that if I only wanted some old friends' corpses, I would hardly have gone to this much trouble. She now suspected our whole meeting had been arranged by me in advance, because I had ulterior motives and meant to subvert her Night Moon Country. Her theories were getting more baroque by the minute, so I tied her to the leg of the bed and told her to think whatever she liked, because I was going to sleep. She barked that I had better not dare make her sleep on the floor, and I waved a hand and gagged her. Sleeping is the one thing I have never been bad at. First light came through the window, and the wolf who had made noise most of the night was curled in the corner, out cold. I took her by the scruff and told her to stop sleeping because we were leaving. She cracked one eye, considered the situation, and closed it again. I tucked her into my arm and walked out. Hojan was waiting outside the door with a smile ready, asking whether Brother Jin had rested well, and I thanked him for his hospitality. He noticed the bald little mutt and asked curiously whether I meant to bring her into the trial. I said that was right, that Snowy and I depended on each other and went nowhere apart. The name stopped him for a second before he laughed and called Brother Jin a truly humorous man for naming a coal-black animal Snowy. I said there had been no help for it, since Snowy spends all her time dreaming of a coat of pure white fur. Then I asked whether bringing her along was permitted. He said the trial placed no limits on methods, battle pets included, and invited me to follow him. We walked a long way before the ground opened in front of a valley, and I could feel powerful auras stacked all through it. I asked Brother Ho what this place was. He said it was the forbidden ground of Night Moon Country, and also the proving ground for the marriage contest. Deep inside it grew an equinox flower, and whoever plucked it was qualified to marry Princess Wanon. I said that explained a great deal, then asked why I could not see any of the other competitors. He said they had gone in already, and that he had made a special trip to collect me. I made a show of shame at having delayed him. He waved it off, saying we had hit it off from the first and this was nothing. Besides, going in first guaranteed nothing, because only the one who comes out holding the equinox flower has won. Then he led me into the forbidden ground. We passed through a long canyon into dense forest under towering ancient trees, and the wet heat and the drifting miasma made the danger self-explanatory. Hojan shot me one quick look and said nothing about it. That miasma chews on cultivators, golden core included, and the only reason he could stand there breathing was his monster clan physique. A human in that forest would have died quietly inside half a day. I looked around, praised the forbidden ground for living up to its reputation, and pulled 2 medicinal pills out of my robe. I swallowed one and pushed the other into Snowy's mouth. Then I told Brother Ho that this was no ordinary miasma, and that I happened to carry some specially made detoxification pills. Watching me see straight through his little arrangement, he switched instantly to regret. If Brother Jin had not mentioned it, he would nearly have forgotten, he said, and the miasma here was terribly potent, but his fox physique was strong, and he would not waste Brother Jin's pills. He pushed my hand back with a smile. Eating something of unknown origin from a stranger's palm is an efficient way to die, and we both knew it. He asked how I had spotted the miasma at all, since it was unique to this forbidden ground, and whether that meant I had been here before. I said I had naturally never set foot in it, but that I had once read something similar in a nameless old book that cataloged the scenery of many places. He said that was truly interesting, and pointed out that no outsider had entered the forbidden ground in 500 years, so who exactly had written this ancient book of mine? I said I would not know, since the thing was rotting apart by the time I found it, and perhaps it had been written 500 years ago. He agreed that this made sense and said we should move, since Biom and the others had been inside a while. Then he waved his right hand and a puppet at the nascent soul stage came out to walk point for us. I looked at that lifeless thing leading us through the trees, and kept my face very still. The Fox clan builds its puppets out of somebody, and I already knew whose corpse they were holding. Deep inside the forbidden ground, a bald man sat cross-legged above a pitch-black pool whose water was thick as tar and stank in slow pulses. The Wolf King told him his no-sorrow mind cultivation technique would not hold much longer. The bald man opened his eyes and answered that a power borrowed like this would only bring catastrophe down on the monster clan in the end. It was not yet too late to turn back. The Wolf King sneered at the word. Why turn back, he asked, when power is only power and carries no label of good or evil, and without it he had no way to destroy the great Xi'an dynasty. He added that although they were of different races, he admired the monk greatly, and that if Master Ilhu left the darkness for the light, he would help him break through to soul transformation. Master Ilhu shook his head and shut his eyes again. The Wolf King did not mind the refusal. It had taken him 300 years to tear a crack in the seal of the forbidden ground, and though the gap was tiny, what leaked through exceeded anything he had imagined. That leakage was the whole reason the cultivator count of Night Moon Country had more than doubled. Somehow the news had gotten out, and those 2 old ones from the Qianbul Temple and the Yungrong sect had thrown their lives away to reseal the gap. He had done everything he could to stop them, and they had still filled in most of the crack. With Master Ilhu sitting on the last opening, he did not dare move carelessly, since if the monk stopped caring whether he lived, the final gap might close. He asked whether Turtle Elder had cleared up that human's background. Turtle Elder reported no record of the man anywhere in the Great Xi'an dynasty, so he was presumably using a false name. The Wolf King said to let him strut a few more days, because once the blood sacrifice was complete, human clan or monster clan, everyone would bow. Turtle Elder lowered his head quietly, and nobody in that hall could have said what he was thinking. At the Bronze Ancient Temple, we ran into Biom again, and since neither side liked the other, the air went tight at once. I ignored the 2 of them squaring off and went straight to the ruin. Instead of working out how to kill each other, I told them they might take a good long look at these stones. Biom said sourly that I could stop trying to be mysterious. There had been an open road to heaven which I ignored, he said. And then I kicked down the gates of hell to get inside. And today was the day Jin Jiangsang died. His voice was cutting into my concentration, so I asked whether he could wait a moment before killing me, since he could plainly see I was studying something. Then I went back to the patterns. Biom stood there with no idea what to do with that. He wanted to kill me right now, thank you, and I could at least have the decency to take it seriously. My indignation stunned him long enough for the anger to catch up. And when he moved, Hojan's nascent soul puppet stepped into his path. Biom demanded to know whether he was siding with an outsider. Hojan glanced at me, bent over the temple, and paying neither of them any mind. Killing can be done at any hour, he said, and Biom should not forget what they had come here to do. That drained most of the fight out of him, since he had never been targeting me over the marriage contest. Anyone with sense could see the human had not come for Wan and Wool, and a man who had not come for the princess had come for something else. A golden core cultivator walking alone into Monster Clan territory has someone standing behind him, and wrecking their own objective would cost far more than my escaping. So Hojan talked him down and I went back to reading stone. After a while he came up beside me and asked whether Brother Jin had found any clues. I asked whether Brother Ho had heard of the limitless secret realm inside the Great Qian Dynasty's territory. He said he had heard a little and asked what connection it had to this place. I said the connection was probably a large one because there was a bronze ancient temple in the limitless secret realm too, which was no secret back home. And here in the forbidden ground stood one built to a matching pattern. I asked Brother Ho what he made of that. Both of them were interested now, even cold-faced Imbiom. Night Moon Country and the Great Qian Dynasty had both been founded over 1,000 years ago, and both ruins had stood since. 2 countries, 2 matching temples, and neither of them knowing why. Hojan said the limitless secret realm was controlled by the Great Qian Dynasty, and only the human clan were permitted inside. I told him not to say he did not know, since very few people in either country did. The patterns on these temples were peculiar, I said, and did not read like ordinary ornament, so if neither of them was in a hurry I could try to decipher them. Hojan looked at me with frank doubt and said many elders of his clan had tried and come away with nothing. He asked whether Brother Jin was confident, and his eyes finished the rest. If the mighty of the monster clan had failed, what business did a golden core human have trying? I pulled out a stack of white papers covered in patterns, and told him that facing one bronze ancient temple alone, I had no confidence whatsoever. But Brother Ho should not forget that there were people studying the temple in the limitless secret realm as well, and 2 together might be enough. Whoever left both behind meant future generations to understand something rather than to be mystified. The reason we could not read them was simply that the gulf of time was too wide, and the script of that age had died. Then I laid the patterns of the 2 temples side by side, and both of them crowded in to watch. 3 hours later, I said aloud that this was how it worked. Hojan asked whether I had found something, and I told him I had deciphered the secret of the bronze ancient temple. Imbiom could not stop himself from demanding I say it quickly. I did not draw it out. I pointed at the carvings. As young lords of their clans, they must have seen that the patterns related to each other, and that no matching script had ever been found. Imbiom asked what that proved, since nobody could say how long these things had stood, and the loss of a script from that era was reasonable. I said Brother Im was right, but that the whole point was to convey information to people who came later. Did he really think the builder had failed to consider that? He told me impatiently to spit it out. Whoever it was had certainly considered time, because the years are long and no one can promise that today's script survives to be read tomorrow. So a being who wanted to pass information forward would choose a method that outlives script, and the simplest such method is pictures. I hung the white papers in the air, adjusted their order, then took rubbings of the temple's carvings with spiritual energy and let the 2 sets drift together. Piece by piece they locked, and a broken image assembled itself above the clearing. Script comes apart, I said, but pictures do not. Because pictures are the first way any living thing learns anything. From the moment a creature opens its eyes, it knows mountains and rivers and plants by their shapes. The marks on this temple were never script but a picture, which is why treating them as script had never worked. Watching the thing assemble, Hojan and Imbiom developed a respect they had not arrived with. It had stood for thousands of years without anyone reading it, and a human cracked it in a few hours. Then all 3 of us looked at what the picture had to say. It was badly incomplete, but enough of it survived. And what survived was a story. A long time ago, at intervals, a giant hand came down out of the sky and took the living things off the ground. The living things fought back with everything they had, and it never once mattered. Then one day a human found a powerful force. The pictures never explained where the force came from, only that all living things used it and beat the giant hand out of the sky. At first everyone believed it was a gift from the gods. Afterward, everyone discovered that the force was more dangerous than the giant hand had ever been. There the picture stopped. Imbiom said quickly that I should bring out the rest, that he wanted to know what happened next. I spread my hands and told him that was all of it. Between us, we had assembled perhaps 1/10 of the illustration, and the complete story would take the patterns from all 18 bronze ancient temples. He looked back at the last fragment hanging in the air, the most intact section of a mostly blank ruin. That force had been sealed beneath 18 temples, kept by 18 races, of which 2 were the human clan and the monster clan. Whatever the pictures once said about the other 16 had long since rotted away. Having understood cause and effect, Imbiom and Hojan quietly moved to close off every direction I might run. I clicked my tongue and asked whether, seeing as I had just solved the riddle, they could let me finish speaking. Hojan laughed and said my comprehension frightened them, and that talent like mine would be treasured anywhere it landed. What he did not understand was why I had entered a marriage contest, and this was not the moment for another line about admiring Princess Wanan. I said of course I had a purpose, but that first I wanted to tell them the rest of what I had learned. The cultivator count of Night Moon Country had suddenly doubled, while the Great Qian Dynasty was routed out of its own armor, and that oddity had bothered me the whole way here. After arriving, I learned of an enormous internal purge, which confused me further because a country's strength does not rise after a purge. I had also learned that the Great Xian dynasty might be carrying a traitor. Every clue pointed at every other clue, and one piece was always missing, and standing in front of these stones, I had finally found it. I walked back to the temple. All 18 tell the same story, I said, and the years have chewed them up, so any single one is far too little to reconstruct anything useful. Which gave me reason to suspect that the traitor of the Great Xian dynasty had defected carrying this secret in his hands. Then I asked whether they had noticed that this temple had been deliberately damaged, and that the damaged section was precisely the part showing all living things using the ominous power. Hojan's face changed and he asked what exactly I was driving at. I sat down on the ground and said, at leisure, that they should stop thinking about killing me, because killing me was not their turn. From their reactions, neither of them knew the secret behind Night Moon Country's sudden strength. And unless I was wrong, they had both come here to find it. Now that they knew it, I asked whether they thought the one who defaced the temple would let them walk out. A voice from the tree said that was excellent, that such a talented young man was rare in the world, and had made this king look at him with new eyes. The Wolf King came out with Turtle Elder at his shoulder. Hojian and Imbayam lost their composure at once, and Hojian reported that this man was a spy whom they had been preparing to offer up. The Wolf King sneered, and said the Fox clan always did love its little tricks. They had put the Tiger clan up to hunting wool in the first place, wanting nothing more than to use his daughter to learn the secret behind everything. Now that they knew it, were they still not satisfied? Cold sweat came down Hojian's forehead. The two old fools of the Fox clan and the Tiger clan had believed that by joining hands they could make him surrender the secret, and that thinking was simply too naive. Then he waved his right hand and threw two bloody heads down in front of Hojian. The two young lords very nearly came apart, because it had never occurred to either of them that the Wolf King was this strong. He told them they were the future of the Monster Clan, and that if they abandoned the darkness now, he would spare their lives and hand them opportunities. Neither hesitated before surrendering. With that settled, the Wolf King turned to me, said he greatly admired my talent, and offered to spare my life if I named the mastermind behind me and submitted. I smiled and told him he was going to be disappointed, because the person standing behind me was someone he would never guess. Then I mentioned that obtaining that force required a blood sacrifice, and that he had not killed me yet, presumably because he did not want to waste me. His eyes narrowed and he said coldly that I really did know a great deal, and since this was the case, he would grant my wish. He swept one hand and moved me somewhere else entirely. A vast blood pool lay in front of me, with its shoreline paved in white bone. The corpses of the two nascent soul greats of the Fox clan and the Tiger clan went in. The pool boiled, and in short order it condensed a single pitch-black pill. The Wolf King looked at the pill in his palm, swallowed it whole, and frowned. Without his daughter's blood to guide it, he said. He doubted this pool could carry him through to soul transformation, and he asked Turtle Elder whether there was truly no other way. Turtle Elder walked to his side and reported that this old man did indeed have another method. The Wolf King asked what method. Turtle Elder's hand went through his chest, and black text came crawling off that hand and spread across the Wolf King's body. Eating him, Turtle Elder said, would break him through to the divine realm. The Wolf King stared at him with plain disbelief. Nobody saw it coming, Hojan and Imbiam least of all, since they could not understand why the Wolf King's own right hand would knife him. The Wolf King twisted to counter and found that the strength he had spent his life being proud of would not answer him. Turtle Elder told him not to waste his energy, since a man who can carry you to the peak of soul transformation naturally has a way to shut you off. Then he drew his hand back and pulled out the Wolf King's heart and every scrap of his cultivation with it. The heart smoothed itself into a pill in his fingers, and he pocketed it, then asked why I was not afraid of him. While he was asking, he swatted Hojan and Imbiam flat into the dirt without looking. I met his eyes and said softly that it was awfully late in the day, and asked whether my grandmaster still refused to show his true face. He went still, then said I had guessed it after all, and that I really was the finest disciple Sangchang Temple had produced in 500 years. The old and sagging shape of Turtle Elder began to run like wax, and resolved into an elegant young man. There stood the patriarch of Sangchang Temple, the man who had set my feet on the cultivation path, perfected Okwa. He said it must have been hard for me to come all this way, and asked me to tell my grandmaster how I had worked it out. His voice was as kind and unhurried as ever. Looking at that face, my mouth shook once before I got it under control. Ever since Third Brother brought me the bad news, I had been chewing on how Sangchang Temple came to such an end. I said, Night Moon Country's cultivator count had exploded, true, but my master and the others were not children in the cultivation world, and there was no reason for them to be wiped out to a man. He said indifferently that so I had suspected a traitor in the Great Xian dynasty. I said yes, but that no matter how I turned it, I could not imagine a traitor capable of that degree of destruction. Sangchang Temple cooperates with the dynasty against foreign enemies, but the whereabouts of my master and the others were a sect secret of the highest order. one even the ruler of the dynasty would not have known in full. Whatever faction the dynasty's traitor came from, that man could not have annihilated Songcheng Temple. The only explanation left was a traitor inside the sect. Having reached that conclusion, I suspected everyone in the sect, and I even suspected my master had faked his death. What I never expected was that it would be my grandmaster. He was already a soul transformation power. His position in the Great Qian dynasty was beyond challenge, and Night Moon Country had nothing it could offer to buy him. He nodded and said that was reasonable, then asked how I had become certain afterward. I let out a long breath and told him I had only dared confirm it a few moments ago. After arriving in Night Moon Country, I met a member of the Monster Clan who could recognize blood escape on sight and knew a great deal about Songcheng Temple. What was interesting was that she believed the sect had exactly 9 true disciples. I am nobody in the sect, but a little digging turns up my existence, and she had never turned it up. That told me the traitor was fond of me, or he would not have cut off the flow of information about me. So I ran a small experiment and used my real name at the marriage contest. And to this hour, Night Moon Country still does not know who I am. I looked up and asked whether I really needed to say the rest. He smiled and lifted Snowy out of my arms, checked her bindings, and stroked her fur gently. He told me to go on, since hearing your own story out of someone else's mouth has a flavor all its own. I said that since my grandmaster wanted to hear it, this disciple would tell it properly. To do all of this, a traitor needed rank and strength both, and I had seen my master's body on the way in. So the traitor was not my master. Before the temple was deciphered, I could never find a motive for him. And the moment it gave up its secret, the motive stood up and introduced itself. Also, in the book graveyard of Sangcheng Temple, I had once read a nameless travelogue describing the forbidden ground of Night Moon Country in detail. That travelogue had to be over 500 years old. So my grandmaster had been carrying this idea for 500 years. He laughed out loud and said that recruiting me into Songcheng Temple was the most correct thing he had done in his life. A 500-year plan unraveled by me in 5 years, and my comprehension was without precedent. I could not stop myself from asking why. There was nothing wrong with wanting power, I said. If he had wanted to raise another dynasty, my master and the others would have followed him. So why kill them? He answered without any heat that the Great Qian dynasty had been his past and Songcheng Temple his life's labor, and that he had never wanted the sect dragged into this. But they were too stubborn, and when they found the secret, they did not merely refuse to back him, they spread it. How else did I think the Yongrong sect and the Cheongbul Temple had learned his plan? He had been planning for 500 years, and would not let anyone ruin it. I asked about Third Brother and why he had let him live. He said I knew what Guiamsu was like, lazy by nature, and when Chengpeng and the others turned up the secret, he had been off somewhere avoiding work. Then he asked how I had known that taking that power required a blood sacrifice. I gave him a crooked smile and said that for a man as clever as my grandmaster, he was being slow. He had been into the limitless secret realm countless times, so could he really not tell I had held a portion of the patterns back? He slapped his own forehead and laughed, saying that a disciple this outstanding had nearly made him giddy enough to lose the thread. Then he took my arm and walked me down to the blood pool. He said that out of everyone in Songcheng Temple, I was the one he valued most, and asked whether I knew why he had picked me out at first glance. He had sensed a quality in me that even he did not have, and that quality was stillness. I carried none of an ordinary man's busyness, and none of a cultivator's obsession, and the world passed across my life like a cloud going somewhere else. Cultivators chase the Tao for exactly one thing, which is long life, and yet in a sense soul cultivators who have already lived 1,000 years do not have what I have. The opportunity was standing here, he said, and if the two of us joined hands, we could go further than anyone. I took a step back. He frowned and asked whether I also believed this power was ominous, and told me to set my mind at rest, because he had studied the matter to the bottom. Absorbing the power directly caused trouble, yes, but filtering it through bloodlines removed the problem, and the 18 races guarding the 18 temples were the finest filters available. Wanan Agalta, that fool, had been running the power through his own daughter's body, and congratulating himself on the arrangement. He never realized that an impure bloodline cannot filter it all the way, which is why he ended up countered. I shook my head and told him he had misread me. I had not spent one thought on whether the power was safe, because I had come to Night Moon Country for a single reason. That reason was to carry my master and my senior brothers home. The excitement drained out of his face and left it cold. He said I was the same as ever, and reminded me that those who obey him prosper and those who defy him perish. I said this disciple naturally knew that, and asked him, for the sake of everything between us, to let me finish collecting my master's body first. His displeasure was total, and yet for this one outstanding disciple he found a little patience. He waved a hand. 7 bodies laid themselves out in a neat row, and the restrictions inside Reverend Wanson unwound until he was simply a corpse again. I had eaten and slept beside these people for 10 years. I took out 11 coffins and got to work. Reverend Wanson first, then eldest brother, then second senior brother. I washed them, straightened them, and closed them one at a time. Then I collected the Wolf King as well, wiped the blood off him, and changed him into new burial clothes. His heart was gone past finding, so I carved one out of wood and set it where it belonged. With Ho John and M. Biam added in, 11 coffins came out exactly even. My Grand Master said the Undertaker was an interesting title. Then he asked why I had only dug 3 graves, and whether I imagined I would be walking out of here with all of them. I smiled and told him not to laugh, but that before I entered the sect I sold coffins, and through a series of accidents I had ended up saddled with a confusing name. As a professional in the trade though, this disciple is precise about quantities. Today required 11 coffins, so this disciple would not be taking out any more coffins. He asked where the confidence came from. I grinned and asked whether my Grandmaster had ever heard of the 100 defeats in Mortal Venerable. Before the last word landed, I threw the stone coffin out. It caught the scent of the blood pool and lit up until the whole clearing went white. A towering figure rose out of it and said the evil creature still dared to show its face. Then a fist the size of a hill came down on perfected Okwa. He threw Snowy into its path to buy a heartbeat, but the phantom went straight through her without slowing, and landed on him with everything it had. A cultivator at soul transformation perfection went through the air like a thrown stone. The phantom did not chase him. Instead, it took hold of the bronze ancient temple across the clearing and drove it down on top of the blood pool. My Grandmaster screamed and flew up underneath it to hold it off. Somewhere in a hidden cave, the pressure broke, and a bald man came out of the rock, spitting blood. That was Zen Master Ilhu, who had been sitting on the source of the ominous power all this time. A pitch-black force slammed into the temple, and its fall stuttered to a halt in midair. I scooped Snowy off the ground, not knowing whether she was alive, and shouted at the wounded monk asking what he was waiting for. I was a golden core and nothing more, and without Master Ilhu, I was never leaving Night Moon Country. That phantom was strong, but it was water without a spring, and whether it could beat the ominous power was anyone's guess. So the only thing that mattered was getting far away, and then farther. Master Ilyu did not stop to think it through. He burned his vital essence and cast a divine power of the Chiambol temple, and scripture poured out around us until our outlines went thin as smoke. As we went, I told my Grand Master that this disciple sells coffins, and one day this disciple would come and bury him.